wouldn't be who I am today without the legends who paved the way. I keep it growing till I'm in my grave. This one is for the legends. They fought for me to have the right to grow. Standing their ground so we can take control. Goes out to you when I pack this bowl. Legends, standing tall, standing tall. Soaking game from the OG Cervantes and Ed Rosenthal. Ed Rosenthal gave the torch to the next generation. We ran with the ball. We would grow winning pounds. We the neighborhood legends got hooked on the sound of that Cypress, that Marley, that Willie, that Funk, that Method and Redman, that knocked in the trunk. I'm a nerd. Just like Sub, who we teaching the nation about growing it's herb. It can heal, it can help, it's a medicine, natural cure. What you heard is a government lie. Reefer madness, their tactic to scare you to try. Where we walk has been pledged, and so I keep it growing till the day that I die. This one is for the legends.
In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio is excited to sit down with one of the leading Massachusetts female powerhouses in cannabis, Beth Waterfall. Beth Waterfall is a collaborative leader, educator, connector, and problem solver. Before cannabis, Beth rose through the ranks in the marketing departments at some of Boston area's leading legal and financial service firms. Then one day she attended a cannabis convention on a whim and became intensely inspired. And since then, Beth has been advocating, educating, and connecting people with information, ideas, colleagues, and strategic partners that new business needs to start and grow in the cannabis industry, all while developing one of the largest and most comprehensive industry networks of influencers, thought leaders, and clients in Massachusetts and beyond. Zoom live with In the Weeds on January 20th as we sit down with Beth to hear her amazing story at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at www.facebook.com/Prohibition Talk Radio.
All right. We are back, guys. I'm really excited about today's show. If you guys haven't noticed, this week's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of great guests on the shows lately. So we're really excited to bring in Beth Waterfall from the Beth Waterfall Creative and Elevate Northeast. So you have a laundry list of accolades that go along with what we're going to talk about today, which I can't wait to get involved with, which I'm really excited to introduce you to everybody in our panel. I mean, you pretty much know everybody here and to our audience. So I want to give a quick shout out to our panel. Thank you guys again for joining us this week. We have Sherry Tuckett from the Green Nurse. They do their Can Talk section that we'll have up later here. Again, thank you for coming on. How you doing today, Sherry?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you guys that are game changers in the industry. Truly, truly love it. So thank you. And welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Sherry.
We have Timothy Fair from Vermont Campus Solutions, the Plus segment, which we'll be talking to later. If you guys have any questions, I get a lot of messages every week. Like, how do we get involved? How do we ask questions? Can we call? Because we're not on air anymore due to COVID. Obviously, we don't sit in the studio anymore, which is kind of sad. I miss it. We don't have access to the phone system as we normally did. But the best part is we do have our chats. So if you guys want to get involved in our live chats, whether it's on our pages and our groups, we can see it as we are live here. We can try to respond to them the best that we can. And also, I'd like to say hello again this week to Thomas Marco of Vermont Grow Coaching, who does our Growers Guide every week. I know it's been a crazy week with everybody who's involved with Facebook. If you're on social media in the cannabis industry, big hats off to you guys for dealing with this, right? I feel like we're getting kicked in the balls here a little bit because we're all getting restricted. We're getting a lot of our content taken down. I know I've had a personal issue with this quite a bit recently. Thomas is going through the same thing. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but we are seeing a lot of
I'm on for a day, off for 5, on for a day, off for 3.
right? And then you see people that you're normally following, and they're like, "Hey, we're back," and it's like, "Oh man, what's going on?" You know what I mean? So hopefully, Facebook will stop censoring cannabis. This is one thing I want to put out there for everybody, because I know you guys are watching us here on Facebook. We go live and we do the YouTube thing, and you guys can find our archives. But the Facebook thing is really kind of getting silly, because for years it's been kind of hasn't really been issues, right? I mean, we went through ups and downs with it, ins and outs with it, but now we seem to be having an influx of it all of a sudden. So hopefully, we can have a right to social media again, hopefully, with legalities, and, we basically have a medical right in almost every state in this country right now. You should be able to openly talk about it and communicate with it and educate with it, right? So, and then when we talk about education, we have a great show today with Beth Waterfall, who's done so much in this industry, which is amazing for me. I'm really excited to have you on, because you've really done everything from shows, education, lectures, right? Being involved with NECANs and helping get the education out there. It seems to be a big part of what even Elevate does, right? And
Absolutely.
then the Beth Waterfall Creative, if nobody understands what that is, that's kind of like the PR side of it, right? And then you're helping a lot of these businesses launch, and you're supporting these businesses. So we have a lot to discuss today, but first and foremost, what we always want to do is talk about who we are and where we're from and how we got into cannabis. So that's the first couple of things I want to get involved with right now. We do have right? So happy Inauguration Day to everybody who's tuned in. That seemed to go smoothly, thank God. And then here we are for another 4-year stretch of who knows what, right? It'll be interesting to have those conversations. Me and Tim will brush on that a little bit later when we go over some of the politics and news. But like I said, first and foremost, Beth, the biggest question that everybody asks, and the biggest stigma and the hardest thing to do, is how we get in this cannabis industry. So give us a little bit of your history, because it's really interesting of what changed you, because it's a great story.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody, Joseph, Sherry, Timothy, Thomas. Thank you, everybody, for having me here and welcoming me into your little corner here on Inauguration Day. I know I'm feeling a lot better about everything, and I think really anybody in the industry can feel better about it, particularly for folks who maybe have been thinking about getting into this cannabis industry and weren't sure about, if I jump into an illegal industry, what is that going to do for, my family, for my career down the line? And I think a lot of people that had that kind of interest, and like us in the industry, I know I can't speak for everybody, but I felt a big sense of relief when it was determined that Joe Biden would be our president and that we would be moving forward with a Democratic, across all 3 branches. So I think it's going to be a big year, if not a big 4 years for our industry. So for folks that are looking to dip their toe into this industry, now's the time, strike while the iron's hot, because as more people come into the industry and it becomes more normal, that means more competition. As you're applying for jobs, you're going to have more people that you're trying to set yourself apart from. So as far as how I got involved in the industry, and then I'll move into maybe some tips on, how I think others can do it. For me, it was just that I really hated my old job. I was 35. I was the director of marketing for an accounting firm, which was super boring. But I was doing what I was raised to do, keep climbing the corporate ladder, make more money, have a respectable job. That's what I did. That's the way I was raised. That's, my family, that's how we are. But at 35, it was like my body said, you know what, this isn't working anymore. It was like I had this visceral response to how displeased I was in my career. And so luckily I have a husband who has a great stable job, or, did at the time, and does now, but I was able to just quit. And I know that is a major place of privilege, and just, I was super lucky that I could do that. Certainly we had to, tighten bootstraps and look at our budget to make sure it was like feasible for us to do that. But this job was just making me sick. I was taking Xanax every day, multiple times. And it just wasn't how I wanted to live. And I knew there was something better for me. And in that state of stress that I was in, I was looking at jobs to sell furniture and like crazy things that just didn't align with, what I wanted to do, what my experience was, but I was just so desperate for something different. So being able to make that decision where I could just stop and let myself kind of heal a little bit. It just opened up my mind to new things. And so I've been a cannabis consumer since I was a teenager, September 6th, 1994, up in the woods with Shelly and Danielle and Julie and Lisa. But, you know, I never really thought that it could be anything that was like a job. Now, certainly as a kid, we thought about, oh, wouldn't it be great if we get paid to smoke weed or something? But that, you know, in the 90s, that was not something that anybody was going to do. Fast forward now, it's like, holy shit, I get paid to smoke weed sometimes, or to write about it. But that's, you know, it's taken some time to get there, I suppose. But for me, so I went to a New England Cannabis Convention. It was the first one in Boston in 2015. Just kind of, hey, I like weed. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to consult to some of these ragtag little companies. And really, I was very humbled when I did go there, because I did sit through some of the educational programming and saw that this was legitimate. You know, this was really going to be an industry that was going to transform people's lives, not just for people like me who are looking for something new, a new place to put my skills and experience, but for patients, for people that I loved. Just listening to these technological innovations, like people like Chanel Lindsay talking about decarboxylation. I had never heard of anything like that. And Melissa Bouchard talking about her work, you know, interacting with patients, and just a whole slew of these women that really impressed me. And I just kind of got like starstruck a little bit. But I did approach Ellen Brown because she was starting an educational program at the New England Grassroots Institute at the time. And it was this women's cultivation caregiving. And really, it's that education that changed my life. You know, learning from those women at that event, and gentlemen as well. But then taking the step to, you know, invest in that educational program. I think it was like 8 Sundays, maybe 6 Sundays, something like that. We got together and it was all women talking about caregiving, but then also, you know, leading into that, like the biology, the plant, like what is a sativa and indica, what are terpenes and cannabinoids, and this is shit I had never heard of before. I had just smoked weed, and it was either good weed or bad weed, and I had no idea, you know, what that would mean. And so it was really learning about the plant and learning things like how the government has a patent on certain cannabinoids, and learning about how there's medical studies on, you know, legitimate government sites for cancer and things like dementia and Alzheimer's. That was really the thing that just made my jaw drop, because my grandmother had recently passed away, and I was like, are you kidding me? I didn't know this. And I felt like, you know, I had just been lazy about something that had been a big part of my life. I hadn't taken the time to understand it. And now I look back, I was just saying to a friend last weekend, how in college I took this ethnobotany class, and I decided to do my big project about peyote because I thought I knew everything about weed. And I think, like, if I had studied weed at that time as much as I did peyote, you know, maybe my life would have been totally different, and I wouldn't have found myself in this accounting firm. But I also like to live with no regrets. And, you know, that experience that I did get in those jobs, working at law firms, financial services, you know, it seems on the face of it that has nothing to do with cannabis. But what I found was I could really almost kind of differentiate myself as a marketer, but also somebody that had worked in highly compliant, very regulatory focused environments. So that perspective and that almost paranoia about saying the wrong thing or violating some sort of regulation, that's just kind of built into how I approach my marketing work. So I've been able to take up some clients, and that's the Beth Waterfall Creative. I consult on business development, marketing, communications, and events, kind of not really anymore. But then Elevate was created. It's a passion project. I had started Women Grow Boston, which was a networking group specifically for women. We had great success with that. The city of Boston named April 6th, 2015 or 2016 Women Grow Day because of the work we've been doing to create this new you know, class of entrepreneurs in the city. And so we were making some great progress with that. And unfortunately, the Women Grow National Organization had some troubles. And Tashonda Vincent-Lee, Kara Crab-Burnham, and I decided to start Elevate Northeast, kind of learning from some of the lessons and, you know, some of the ways that Women Grow had maybe done things wrong, or some of the feedback people had about that organization being for profit. So Elevate was very intentionally started to be inclusive of all, not just for women. LGBT, we're really, you know, forward about that. Women, LGBT, veterans, really. And I like to say anybody who felt like I did, granted I'm a very privileged white woman, but I didn't belong where I was in my old job. I had no passion for what I was doing. And honestly, that type of environment can be very difficult for a woman in very traditional corporate environments. They're not always the most friendly towards a young woman. So I'd like to say that, Elevate is for anybody who ever just felt, marginalized in whatever way in their previous careers, because I really do believe there's a place for everybody in cannabis, regardless of what your background is. So Elevate is all about education. Education changed my life. So it's a way to pay it forward and help people change their lives by learning something that can just flip a switch the way it did for me. And that I know it from talking to so many people that's what it is sometimes for them. There's just something that kind of just pushes them into cannabis, and you kind of can't look back once you're there. But yeah, that was all long and drawn out.
Well, no, I mean, that was great. You literally answered almost every question I probably could have asked. One of the biggest things that we talk about a lot is that, when we were getting in the cannabis industry, it was really, really open to people of all races, ethnicities, women, genders. Like, it really didn't matter, right? Because we weren't there for any of that type of discussion, and there was no, we were, let's just smoke a joint and we're friends, right? So it's a very open and welcoming industry. And it's interesting that you brought that up, especially with corporate America, right? I mean, is that something that we see a lot in corporate America that we're not seeing in the cannabis industry? Was it really easy for you to make that transition?
Oh, I'd say those same kind of bad things that exist in corporate exists absolutely in cannabis as well. Cannabis is still business, and people are working to make money. There's competition. People make decisions sometimes based on value, sometimes based on profit. And so, there's definitely in certain situations, we hear about women being maybe objectified in cannabis. And this is definitely a little bit older. We don't see this as much, but in the events industry and marketing, we kind of sometimes use this example of at an event where a woman was covered with meat. And like for an hors d'oeuvre, you've probably seen that before, like a woman's body with sushi. And I don't know, there was just something about it where particularly in the women's event space, where it was like, we can do better than this, where they were like literally ripping off what would look like skin off this woman because it was like meats. It sounded so disgusting. It reminds
me of Lady Gaga. Have you seen Lady Gaga?
Yeah, it's her with like meat suit.
With her meat suit. She had like a meat hat on. She like had meat shoes.
Yeah, really gross. And I think that was real meat too.
I think it was
so nasty. But that still exists. Corporate America is corporate America, whether it's insurance or cannabis. But the difference in the opportunity lies in folks like us, folks like myself, going into these environments. And that's part of my consulting. I'm doing marketing, but part of that is also helping companies position themselves to be successful. And a lot of that, whether it's cannabis or somewhere else, is that corporate social responsibility aspect, whether that's being diverse, doing things to help the environment, helping veterans, whatever it happens to be. It's kind of a way I could continue my advocacy after legalization by working with clients that want to change and be better participants in the industry. And when I realize that that's perhaps not what a client is looking to do, I don't work with them anymore.
It's hard to find people like that right now. And you're in Massachusetts, so there's a lot going on in those lines right now. How do you feel about what Massachusetts is doing right now, like you said, for social equity, for gender equalities, we see the news here and there about these really unique situations, but then we hear so many good things. And then, you brought up Chanel earlier, which was, another great person, and the CCC board. So like Massachusetts is unique because they actually have a cool system there. We talk about it a lot, because we're in New England, and that's, aside from Maine, those are our two major areas of legality right now, right? And a lot of our events, rest in peace to events, we're going
I know, it's so sad.
I know, like I think it hit me after the new year. I was just like, man, I'm starting to miss being able to hug and see my friends, I mean? And, like, going to these events and meeting new people and people that help breathe life into what we do, you know what I mean? Because like, some days it becomes a drag, as we all know. We all have probably issues with, getting out of bed some days, and other days it's fine, right? But, and cannabis is a great help for that. We talk about it a lot. But, new year, right? 2021, we didn't start off that great as a globally,
little weirdness.
yeah, right. But, it's a fresh new year, so it's what we make of it. But for you getting in the industry and transferring from, especially legal practice, right? Because you're kind of like in the law side of things, right?
Law and accounting, like super boring. But no, actually, it's interesting. Like the accounting stuff's not so interesting, but working law firm is kind of interesting.
I mean, there must have been a stigma or something attached. I mean, did everybody like pat you in the back and give you a good hurrah and wish you luck? Or, I mean, what, coming from that kind of situation, especially in like, in Boston, right? Because Boston's kind of a unique little city of its own, right? How were you treated on those notes? Were people just stunned? Did they not believe you?
Yeah, it kind of depended. For a lot of people, it was just kind of met with shock because a lot of, like, still today, people don't understand cannabis and that it's this healing plant and that there's businesses that are giving people jobs and contributing to our communities. People don't see that because we've been raised for the past 80 plus years with a very, very, very effective marketing campaign about how terrible cannabis is. So even for me, 5 years, when I went to the cannabis show in 2015, it was very eye-opening that this was actually a real industry. And had was on a very clear trajectory for me. So I think a lot of people at first was like, are you kidding me? Like what? Like what? It's illegal. I had an uncle who said, oh, so you're a drug dealer now. I had another family member say, why would you go to college if you're just going to do this? And, people definitely thought I was having some sort of mental break, that I was absolutely insane. Whereas the people who really knew me well were like, holy shit, how cool is that? What an awesome opportunity. Fucking go for it.
Now, you said you were consuming at that point, right? Like you've always been in the cannabis, right? So it's not like this was a major like ideal shift for you. It was just getting your family and your people, your coworkers to understand what you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I always was very closeted about my use too. So that was another thing. It was kind of coming out both as a consumer and as somebody who was crazy enough to, abandon my old career and jump into this crazy new world. So I don't know. It's just depends on the individual. And coming out, telling people that I was a cannabis consumer, that's its own thing. Never mind telling them that I want to go work in that space. And like for my friends, they knew I smoked weed, but family, they kind of knew maybe I did it a little bit, but that like after I really started coming out, like I always smell like weed now, and I'm totally fine with that. And they're like, okay. And if I'm at my parents' house, I'm gonna go outside. Like I don't light up in the house. Like I'm respectful about how I do it. But slowly and surely, and I mean, definitely the stigma was there. Like it's taken me a long time. I still haven't like inhaled in front of my parents. I've hid behind a bush and blew out a smoky puff and said, hee, that was me. Like, just like not, I don't know, kind of being silly down at the beach or something. But I'm still not at a place where I would smoke in front of my parents. I don't know, it feels weird, but other people, cousins, aunt and uncles, yeah.
No, it's interesting because I mean, we all get raised a certain way, right? And we have either for or against, and it's like usually pretty split down the middle. It's not, when I was raised, either you were all for it or you're completely against it. And there was really no divide. There's really no understanding from either side of why you either don't or do partake. You know what I mean? Like the people that do are like, you need to, and the people that don't are like, how could you? You know what I mean? Then it was always like, we said reefer madness kind of statistic stuff, which, as we know, even through research, that a lot of it's just bullshit, right? I mean, no one's really ever died. We have no side effects from a plant. You know what I mean? A lot of it is what we put into it. That's what I'm glad we discussed earlier about, just the integrity of people in companies, right? So, I mean, you rose to the ladder. You come from an industry that, like you said, you weren't really involved in this industry at all. And now you get up from everywhere from, MassCan to the South Shore Chamber of Commerce to Women Grow Boston, right? You're even doing weed blogs. Then, NECAN, Community Search, which is another great thing, the research advisory, because these are great friends of ours. And I want to give a big shout out to Campus Center of Excellence. Marion is doing awesome things over there. Randall, I love those guys. So these are things that are really making an impact in our communities, which I love. And then, now Elevate, right? Tell us about Elevate and what you guys are doing there specifically, because, not only are you just a dispensary, right?
No, we're not a dispensary. We're only the nonprofit. We just do our education events. We're not associated with the Elevate, the number 8 dispensary. People do confuse that though, but we're not a dispensary. We're just some people that want to make people learn about weed and like it and all that.
And try it.
But leading up to that, a big part of like why I do all that other stuff. I came from a place where I was coaching executives on how to get hired, right? How to make them stand out. I'm a marketing and public relations. That's my professional background. So the stuff that I was advising others to do, I could do it for myself. And then I also recognized very early on that I was kind of in a unique position, and this happened at a very early Women Grow meeting. There was a woman standing at the back of the room, and she was by herself, and I went back and just talked to her because I wanted her to feel welcome. And you could just tell she was so uncomfortable being there. And she said to me, I don't know that I should be here. If my husband found out, or her ex-husband or something found out, and she was legitimately scared that, somebody would think that she's an unfit mother. So I recognize as a woman who's chosen not to have children that I could kind of use that because, I could kind of be a voice for people who didn't feel comfortable yet speaking up. And it kind of worked. I kind of look like a soccer mom. And so, I don't look like a stereotypical, whatever you want to call it. So I knew that was kind of, again, a differentiator, and that a different set of people might be more inclined to listen to me. And so that's why I've been, very strategic with Elevate of facilitating these relationships with the business journals, and just trying to create education where people are going to learn about business things, and just normalizing it, combining the two. So that's like the Worcester Business Journal. We had a couple events, or 3 events with them before COVID. And that was just a huge way that I could see that I could help destigmatize and all the other people in the industry, just making it more normal for them. So that's a big reason why I've done all this stuff. It's about, breaking the stigma and just being a normal, like, hey, yep, this is like, come on, people. I'm not some crazy, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but I'm a professional woman. And, I hope that that inspires other women too, to just go for it. But Elevate, yeah, we do educational events, obviously for 2021 and most of 2020, it's been all virtual. But next week we have our first event of 2021 at noon on the 28th, high noon on the 28th. Talking about New York, New Jersey. Again, we're Elevate Northeast, and there's been some changes. So we have an attorney from New Jersey that's going to kind of bring us up to speed there and talk about the equity initiatives down there. We have this awesome market researcher that's going to talk about some consumer trends for people that are maybe thinking about product formulations or starting a new business. And then finally, we have a woman from, she's the director of Hyper Ventures, which is a cannabis venture fund out of New York. She's brilliant, and she's going to talk to us about, how things have changed around raising money for a business. So that's how we're kicking it off. And then in February, we have our 4th annual What the Hemp event, where we're going to talk about hemp. And then for March, we're celebrating women in cannabis in honor of Women's History Month. And then we have an active survey. So if folks have any sort of ideas of a speaker they want to hear, or a topic that they want to learn about that fits with Elevate, we have a survey that's live right now that's going out in our emails, and I should post it on our website now that I'm talking about it, just to let us know, because we exist to educate and to empower people, and to really destigmatize, so that we can all be participants in a diverse and inclusive environment, diverse and inclusive industry, in communities that, welcome us and because they understand us instead of fearing us.
Yep. No, I love it. One of the things that rang out to me and that you'd mentioned a little minute ago was not being a parent, right? Which is a choice that many women make, but you're also in cannabis, and you're a woman, right? So you like you said, you deal with this, right? So what is your opinion on our approach to children right now? Are we taking the right approach? Are we taking the wrong approach? Because I think, a lot of times this conversation can get skewed being a parent because you're protective of your children. So, and that can go in different forms. Like, you're either protective of their right to know, or you're either protective of their right to not know and protect your child until a certain age, until you think they're ready, until whatever. But we see a lot of different stigmas being thrown around in our industry, whether you're a parent, like I'm a parent, I have an 8-year-old, he's very involved in what we do, he's very knowledgeable. And I've had, other friends of mine be very upset with that. And I've had other friends of mine be very like, hey, pat you on the back, man, because a lot of people are afraid to let people see that this is normality. To me and to my son, it's medicine. It's another plant. It's nothing that is out of the ordinary to him. It's not something that, and within this, the way I've kind of approached it with him, to me, I think it's something that I don't know if you even bother trying, to be honest with you, because there's like there is no like, when we were kids, there was like that, oh, we can't try it yet, but we have to try it. So it's kind of like we want to
taboo is so hot. Yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like I couldn't wait to try beer because that's what all the big kids did at the parties, and I want to go party with the big kid. To the party was like, oh, here's a cigarette. You want to smoke this with us? And then here's a joint. And then, unfortunately, to me, this is where I think leads into other drugs, and it's not cannabis. You know what I mean? Where everybody says cannabis is the entry drug. I'm like, no, dude, the parties were, man. Like, high school parties are the worst things, right? Because that's where everybody handed somebody something, right? And it's up to you and your education to say yes or no, right? So, and hopefully, and that's where I fall in line with this idea. But what do you think? You're not a mom, right?
Right.
But you're doing these things, and you have a lot of respect for children and the education, right? So how do you think we should approach this?
So I would never for a second say that I know what parents should do. Speaking as I'm an auntie, and pretty much all my girlfriends have little kids, so I can just speak from kind of being an aunt and a friend. But what I will say that for me, when I was about 6 years old, my aunt was getting married down in Florida, and it was at her home. They had this patio kind of courtyard area where they were, people were just kind of congregating before the ceremony, the night before the wedding. And I didn't see it, but my 7-year-old brother at the time saw it. I had my father's first cousin, Stuart. He was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he, tried his best for this wedding to be sober, and he was sober. And unfortunately, he had a seizure because he was going through alcohol withdrawals, and he fell down and cracked his skull open in front of kids because he was an alcoholic. And my mother to this day was like, I should have given him a beer. I should have given him a beer. But, from a very young age, that was alcohol. And I wish that as a younger person, maybe I'd been told, alcohol is this terrible thing, but there's other stuff too. Not like we're all pounding beers while cousin Stu is down with his skull cracked open. Like it's hard for a kid to kind of understand that when people are drinking, but somebody else is suffering, and it's bad when he does it, but it's okay when we do it. So I think that's really confusing for kids. So I think early talking about whether you're a grower or you're in the industry, every parent has access to Google right now. Maybe not everybody, but pretty much everybody, whether it's on your phone, at the library, your laptop at work or at your own home. We are at a point now with the amount of media coverage around cannabis. I think it's irresponsible for a parent to not educate themselves, to know what, given again, the kind of political climate around cannabis, that this is changing, legalization is happening, businesses are opening in our communities. I hate to say it, but I think it's irresponsible to not teach our kids about what that is. The same way when I used to walk into a liquor store with my parents when I was a little kid, it was clear that this wasn't something for kids. I'm not saying dispensaries should let kids in, but I really think parents are doing themselves and their children a huge disservice at this point if they are not letting their kids know the facts about cannabis as we know them now. There's so many resources. And I think maybe but through that education, like I was always really just fascinated with smoking. And I think maybe if I'd been educated a little bit more, maybe I wouldn't have, but like at 11 years old, like we used to roll up tea in cupcake wrappers and go down to the end of my girlfriend's parents' driveway and smoke tea because we thought it was being outrageous and that people would drive by and say, oh my God, there's 10-year-olds smoking cigarettes. But I always had this fascination with smoking. I just wish I'd gotten a better education about it. And maybe I wouldn't have been so inclined to want to try so many different types of drugs if I'd gotten a better education about it. Because I definitely did, but I've always come back to cannabis. I never turned into a hard addict. I definitely tried stuff and experimented, but I've always loved cannabis, and it's always been, confusing and disappointing to me why alcohol was always celebrated, even with my family, you know, people telling me that cannabis was bad and all that. It's always just been a weird dichotomy to me. And I think now parents have the facts, unlike maybe my parents did in the 80s and 90s. There really is no excuse to empower your kids with the truth.
Exactly.
So I'd be actually willing to go as far as to say that when it comes to providing cannabis as education to your children, you're actually being neglectful if you don't provide them that information at this age. Just like if you don't discuss with them, you know, LGBTQ and everything along those lines too. There's so much that's changed between when we were kids and when our kids are kids now, that they need to be aware of coming into this world, or they're not going to make it. They need to be brought up and explain this information so that they can make the decisions on their own. I have 4 kids myself, 3 girls and a boy. The boy is 15 years old, and he has openly told me numerous times, I'm not interested. I don't want to do it. I don't have any interest in ever consuming it. But he knows damn near everything about the plant, how to clone. He spends days and days and days upon and hours upon time in the hemp field and in the greenhouse and stuff at the start of the season, but will never actually pick it up and smoke it himself. Why? Because he was properly educated on it, and he realizes, I don't want any sort of recreational high, and I don't need the medicine, I don't think, so I don't want it. Right. And I think that's fantastic. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was presented that information, I feel that I'd be hiding in my basement when I need to go smoke a joint, or when I need to go take medicine or something.
And then he won't trust you.
Right.
Exactly.
And then he's off playing video games. He's like, oh my God, he's lying to me. He's just sitting down in the basement smoking weed all the time.
That's what kids think. Kids think that you're lying. And I have a couple stories. So my 3 children, I have a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 21-year-old. And when I started preparing Green Nurse education for the patients that come to see us, wrote a huge handbook. I reviewed it with my kids. And after I reviewed it with them, I said to them, so guys, what do you think about mom being a marijuana nurse? They didn't know that marijuana and cannabis was the same thing.
Oh, wow.
So they had no idea. And this was like 6 years ago. So they were much younger, because what they were taught in the DARE program was completely 100% false, right? It's outdated. The research is completely unsupported. And the other thing that's really important is I worked with a kid that was coming off of heroin. Okay, this is a really important story. A young teenager coming off of heroin, helping him mitigate side effects of withdrawal with his parents. And when I asked him, I said, why, I'm just curious, what made you try it? And this is what he said to me. He says, you all were lying about cannabis. Okay. Cannabis is Federal 1. Cannabis is illegal. He says, but why are some people smoking it? Why do some states have it for medical? Why do some states have it for recreational? So if you're lying about cannabis, then you must be lying about everything else. Yep. That to me broke my heart.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of it to me. I have a hard time minding my son, but I think a lot of it's about how you teach your children to understand and process what's going on in the world. You know what I mean? It's like not only cannabis, but like politics and everything else. It's like, you know, I try to teach my kid to understand his surroundings and to have a general thought process on everything he intakes. So like when he comes home upset with somebody and he wants to call a bad name, or even like that thought process, you know what I mean? Like, let's not do that. You know what I mean? Let's think about this, because everybody has, you know, there's like, you know, some people say there's 3 sides to every story, right?
I say that all the time. What you said, what I saw, and what actually happened.
And like, you know, Sherry talks about this a lot in their daily AFA, when, you know, in the morning at 8 a.m. guys, if you're ever up that early, I have a hard time struggling unless I have my son, but it's really about attitude, right? And it's really about your approach, and then it comes in your mental health, right? And then, you know, here's where cannabis can help with all that. We have a great segment today talking about a lot of that, which we're going to get to here in just a couple minutes, so we can have time for everything else in the show. And I'm really excited for that, because I have all these leading segues in my head, and hopefully I don't forget them, because, you know, between Beth and Tim, you guys have a lot of connection there. So there's a lot of things I want to talk to you guys about with, you know, what California is doing, what's going on in politics, you know, opening and working in a legal atmosphere. What's that like, you know, especially in Mass? Like, has it been difficult for you in the ups and downs, especially the hemp and CBD market? Because not only, you know, are you really knowledgeable about cannabis, but hemp is one of your major backgrounds, which is a lot of fun for us to talk about, and what's going on in those areas, especially in Massachusetts, because, you know, we've heard horror stories about, you know, testing over, and then, you know, the new FDA regulations that just came out. And I want to square away a few things, because I've had a lot of messages about, you know, the 1%, all these different crazy things. So we have a lot to discuss, but when it comes to parents, I think, just like everything, I think when you break the stigma on anything, it's like driving or smoking cigarettes or something like, right now we have ages that we're supposed to, 21, right? But the thing that kills me, and when we're on radio, one of our only complaints came from a parent because their kid could hear us in the morning. And I was like, well, A, your kid should be at school, and B, you should let your kid hear us, right? Because we're trying to educate everybody from what I tell everybody, 4 to 94, right? Because we all have a need for medicine, right? And the thing that changed my life were kids with all sorts of various situations in their lives where they were using cannabis and it was working, right? People with cancer that were stage 4. And finally, everybody gave up and they allowed them to try cannabis oil. These people are still alive today. We see it, a lot with seizures and medication for that, which has been amazing. And everybody's, both sides again. We see a video on the internet and it breaks my heart. And I've seen it. I've been there firsthand. That's what really changed my life for me when I got into it. So when we educate people, the biggest thing is, like I said, kids, like, let's not leave these kids out because they're going to come into a certain age and we're going to say, no, you can't know what this is. And like we all talk about in this panel, they're going to want to know and they're going to find out from the wrong people, right? Whether it's sex education, drug education, you know what I mean? It's like, the heroin addicts to me for me, I'm like, how do you, like to find somebody that still wants to pick up a needle and try heroin nowadays blows my mind because of the fact that you must know somebody who's died from it, whose life's been ruined from it. Like, it's one of the, opioids is one of the biggest killers in our country, right? Sadly. And we see cannabis right now taking making a big impact in those numbers, right? Especially with alcoholism, opioid usage. There's some staggering reports coming out recently about how much alcoholism has gone down in our country because of COVID, A, and B, because of access to cannabis, right? Why do I want to get home and be drunk and sad and whatever all day long when I can smoke weed and be happy and go play with my kids and go do a project? The amount of projects I've seen from my cannabis friends since COVID is amazing. Like all my friends who've really been on lockdown, you know what I mean? And we've had friends microdose. So the mushroom thing is kind of a cool thing that Sherry talks about a lot. I'm sure we all talk about, but the parental thing is cool. What you're doing with Elevate's awesome. How do people reach out to you and get involved? You know what I mean? The biggest thing is getting people over that stigma and that threshold of getting involved. We get asked this all the time. How do I get involved? So Beth, you guys are doing, like you said, you have a bunch of great things that come up that you just mentioned. How do people get involved aside from that?
So folks can follow us on social. Our handle is at elevate_NE, and our website is elevatene.org. I think one of the greatest ways that folks can jump into the industry, actually this weekend, Elevate has a partnership with the Holyoke Community College with their cannabis education program. And we've started this. It's really basic for people that are looking for basically entry level types of positions in cultivation, extraction, culinary, and working with patients. So we have this core program. It's Saturday and Sunday. I'm going to be there for a little bit on Saturday. But we bring in a couple, actually there's 4 experts, although I hate to use that field because I think that word, because in cannabis, we're still all learning so much. So don't trust anybody who says they're an expert because there's no such thing yet, I don't think. But that's, a weekend, basically immersion to learn about the plant, different pieces of the like botany, like, why the plant does this, and really that basic stuff that for me, like changed my life. And then for folks that, want to get a little bit more involved in, learning more business or different kind of topical things like the women or hemp, like I mentioned before, our monthly Lunch and Learn series is live now. Again, elevatene.org to get all the event information, sign up, please become a member, support us. We're a volunteer run team. We run very lean, but, I think we've, established a really good, reputation. We have big growth goals for this year. So we're definitely welcoming businesses to support so we can make some strategic hires and grow. We have a new website coming out in about a month. So that's going to be awesome. And yeah, so just look for us. And once events are happening again, I'm sure we'll be in those expo halls. And I look forward to, seeing people and hugging people and getting back into smoke circles, although you have to bring your own this time.
The new normality, right?
I'm down. All got to evolve a little bit, right?
Right. Well, it's giving us all time to really kind of regroup and refocus on where we need to be in our lives. And I think it's giving a lot of people new appreciation for what's going on, especially when it became essential. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people were just like, wait, what? I can pull up to a curb and buy cannabis now. And like you must have, and one of the biggest things I saw in the industry, and I saw this in Mass, and this was immensely huge for me. Like you get into the industry at 2015, roughly, right? So we were doing the reliable bud events, and it was like from the beginning. Yeah, we all, I think, a lot of people went. So I'm sure somewhere along the line, we all ran into each other at a reliable bud event, which were great. Unfortunately, it became a city issue. And then we started
Spencer, right? Those were in
Spencer, Mass, Spencer Fairgrounds. That was amazing. That was really fun.
So I grew up near there. We used to play soccer in Spencer. The Spencer girls were really good at soccer.
Well, it's a great event. The first few events, what was interesting to me is going to their first event and going to their last event and just seeing who went. For me, I'm a people observer. So the first time I went, it was like Black Friday on Cannabis Sunday. It was the craziest time. There was like a line of people. They stormed the gates. They ran into the thing. It was like, what? But it was like our typical our smokers groups. Our all of our friends and stuff like that. And then it got to the end where it was like their parents, and they were there going, hey, my kid sent me here, and what is a sativa? Like, he tells me about and what is this and what's that, and it's like the medical people looking, which we talk to Sherry every week about now, we talked about before. What's been one of the biggest changes that you've seen in Mass? Because Mass kind of came on awkwardly, they came on strong, and now we're at where we're at now. Let's talk about the Mass industry really quick with you, and then how you feel about where it sits right now.
So the biggest change, I think, when you mentioned parents, I think the biggest change is that more people are getting more comfortable with it. There's all sorts of changes happening on the regulatory side and marketing. We just have new regulations that came out that dispensaries can have kind of minimally branded non-cannabis products. So that's exciting. But for me, it's just seeing that this is becoming more normal, seeing that it's becoming part of the Massachusetts culture. It's why people travel, would like to travel here, I suppose. But we're seeing brands that are really reflecting certain aspects of New England life, beachy things. I just love that there's Massachusetts branding happening, and it's appealing to different demographics. My parents, who were so against cannabis. I remember going to an ABBA Live concert with my mom in like my mid-20s and saying, oh, I'd love to smoke weed with you someday. And she's like, I'll never do it. But now they're like, oh, we got this little package down at Verilife on our way to the Cape, and they have weed. And my father will say, oh, I had a couple puffs. And it's just so staggeringly different from my reality several years ago. And just other people in my life too, not just my parents, but other folks, friends, other family members who were very against cannabis. They're like, Beth, I went to the dispensary, or I got these 2 milligram THC tabs. What do you think about it? And like, go for it, I think that people, particularly this year with COVID, people got a lot more, like you were saying before about drinking, just not wanting to be sad and drunk, but, happy and lifted. I think more people are definitely turned to that. I think the stats and the revenues show that. And that essential designation was so important for us. And I can't help thinking that if I wasn't in the cannabis industry, I might not have had a job. I could have gotten laid off if I was still working at the accounting firm. So just the change, the normalcy, it's the most rewarding part of it, because that's why I do what I do. So that's what I'm focused on. And it's just rewarding to see that, people from different ages, different backgrounds, just being comfortable about cannabis now.
Yep. Right.
Still a lot of work to do, but
oh yeah,
we're chipping, all of us, every little effort, every one person that you can get to just think a little differently about it, or to not be so against it, but like, okay, I may not want to try it, but I also recognize that this isn't like some deadly, horrible thing anymore. You know, those little conversations go a long way, because then they tell their friend, oh, I was talking to Beth and she said this, and oh, have you heard that before? And then, oh my gosh, my cousin said that. And it just creates conversation. The more you can just drop it in. And I'm always talking about weed everywhere I go. And people want to talk about it too. So that's great.
Right. Yeah, right. There's a lot of people engage us in conversations everywhere, I believe. You know, Thomas, Timothy, Sherry, we talk about a lot where, you know, I think one of the common things that you talked about earlier was smell. I'm like weed, right?
I love it.
When we're on radio, everywhere I went, people recognize my voice, right? So I guess I got a voice that stands out, right? So, and I'd be, you know, in a restaurant, me and, you know, Rick and I would be sitting in a restaurant and we'd be talking, and all of a sudden, you know, just a waitress would, you know, an older waitress would come over and be like, are you
Oh, that's awesome.
So, you know what I mean? I've been in the middle of the woods at a waterfall, and basically a woman passed by with her kids. Well, this was blowing to me too. When a woman passed by with her kids one day, it was when I was having a bad day. So I'm like, you know, I'm gonna go to the waterfall. I'm gonna go enjoy nature. It was the COVID, and it was the beginning of summer, and this lady came by, and she was like, I forget what it was. Excuse me. I was like, oh, sorry. Have a great day. And she was like, she just turned and looked at me. And she goes, are you on radio? And it was just like, yeah, we don't know the impact of how we reach people, but like it's weird. And the thing I love talking about on the show is, what was that impact? You know what I mean? And like you were saying, you know, you had a family member that, you know, once you were starting to learn about cannabis, you're like, wait, you know what I mean? So it opened up an interest to you of like, hey, could this have worked? And then you do a little bit of research and you start following the rabbit hole, and you see this rabbit hole turns into this big thing, and then you realize, I've been lied to. You know what I mean? It's like that thing we're talking about with our kids. Like, how do we trust our government? How do we trust people who've been either for this or against this? How do we trust the people that crossed that fence, that were putting people in jail 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and who are now the faces of some of these cannabis businesses, right? And, you know, and I hate to pick on those people, but I think we all share the same thing. We had somebody that close to us that impacted our lives, because even for me as a cannabis smoker, since I was 13, you know what I mean? I was the typical blunt smoking Bostonian. I lived that life, you know what I mean? I was definitely that stigma. I'm not gonna lie, where we're just rolling up every day. We didn't care, you know what I mean? It was just that we're those people, right? And for even me, when I start talking, and I'm sure we all even have this, because when we talk to recreational users that have been smoking for years, they're like, how does this shit cure cancer? You know what I mean? How is this going to help me with my glaucoma? I've been smoking for years, and whatever. And as we talk and educate, like, you know, the basis of our show is, you know, everybody from 4 to 94, right? Where it's not stoner talk radio. We're trying to educate people, right? So it's the more and more they tune in, the more and more they listen. It's like you said, the more they believe and they listen. And then, you know, then we just start knocking down dominoes, right? You know, and the biggest thing for me is like the Green Nurse Show. It's somebody, you know, like you coming from a law, like Timothy coming from a law, somebody that's coming from a background that somebody can't argue with. Like, for me, it's like Joe Zidi, a savant. He's been smoking weed since he's a kid. He's a musician. You know, he came out of the music industry. Of course, he smokes weed. You know, they just want to see weed legal so he can go to concerts and smoke weed. I'm like, dude, I go to concerts anyways.
I can smoke weed anyway.
You're right. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But like, when I saw it impact people in the way it does, especially from a medical side, it's blown my mind. Thomas shares his story a lot with us, and he almost puts me in tears. And he does it on social media. So if you follow Thomas, he's very open about how cannabis helps him. And these are the things that I think we need to see from people. You know what I mean? Timothy has a great story about battling addictions and using cannabis, right? So if you guys don't know about Tim and his story, there's another great story. And Sherry just recently got to sit down with Tim on her show. So I'm sure there's an archive here somewhere that we can find. We got to get you to sit down with Thomas as well, because, you know, these are all issues that a lot of us fight. You know what I mean? A lot of us, I don't think, will even be like, when we talk about the medical impacts that cannabis can have, right? You know, Tom has, like, you know, Asperger's, right? And we all have things, anxiety, some of the things we don't even think about every day. And we go, how does cannabis help me with that? And, you know, especially with the people that go, I get anxious. You know what I mean? One of the worst things I've seen and the things I hate hearing is from the people that go, hey, you know, I tried weed, but it got me really anxious. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, did anybody explain to you the high? Mm-hmm. Do you know you smoked, and how did you take it? You know what I mean? Did you, you know, inhale it? Did you, you know what I mean? How did you consume your product, right? These are all the things that I think we need to educate. So I appreciate you talking. I'm sorry I'm talking a lot. I'm kind of really high as well.
It's all good.
I think these stories are important. But that being
Totally.
said, I want to lean into Sherry's segment here from her segment today. We're talking about traumatic brain injuries, which is very interesting because for me as an athlete, I was in sports. I've had concussions. I personally experienced what was a severe head puncture wound, right? So I had post-concussive syndrome for a while, and that actually took me out of music. That took me out of a lot of things that normally I would be able to do. I was in Mass at this time, and this was probably a good 20, 25 years ago. And I tell the story a lot because the doctor had me on like literally 7, 8 different medications, and I could barely stand up for about a month. And after about a month of the knots and the pain and like this just wasn't helping me, I went back to the doctor, and he basically leaned over to me and whispered in my ear, he's like, "Do you smoke weed?" And he's like, if you want to try cannabis, you can go see a neurosurgeon. We can sign off on it, and we'll get you on a card. And I got scared. Literally, I was scared. I was like, I've been smoking for years. I don't need the cops knowing. I've been busted for this. Like, I'm never gonna get on this panel. Like, I don't need anybody knowing my address, where I live, what I'm doing. Like, I don't want that knock on the door. Like, for years, that stigma was a knock on the door. They're gonna come knock on your door and see what you're doing, right? Never really happened to most people, I don't believe. But that was a stigma. So Mass years ago was actually very behind cannabis, which always blew my mind away because I've never heard, even to this day, I have never had a doctor offer me cannabis for any of my issues or times I've ever been there, or they just, here's a drug and a drug and a drug and a drug. And it's like, it blows me away. Right. But for head traumas, it's amazing. Your segment today actually blew me away on all the ways it works, right? And the systems and stuff. So talk about that, Sherry, real quick, and introduce the segment, and just recap your morning segment here, Bruce.
Okay, so really, really interesting. So what we're doing on our show is we're talking about different health awareness. Like every month, there's a different health awareness. And so we talked about thyroid health last week. And so this week we're talking about traumatic brain injury. So it's sports awareness, winter sports awareness, traumatic brain injury. And so basically what we're trying to do is match up just to demonstrate how the endocannabinoid system plays a role in every single condition that exists. Truly it does. And so when I educate on the endocannabinoid system, it's really hard sometimes for patients to understand and grasp the concept because it is very abstract. So I came up with this umbrella image to truly help people to see how this plant can work on so many different systems at the same time, because all of our systems are interrelated, interconnected. So when I educate on the umbrella is us. This is our body. All of the spokes of the umbrella are different organ systems and our immune system. And all of the fabric pieces of the umbrella that attach to the spokes of the umbrella are the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell your body to either do something or not do something. Very tippy top of the umbrella is the endocannabinoid system that blankets. Right on top of that umbrella, we have cannabinoid receptors on the spokes of our umbrella. We have cannabinoid receptors on the different fabric pieces, which are those messenger signaling systems. So we create components in our body like the plant. And when we're not making enough of our own, what happens? The messages don't get where they need to go, right? And our body, the on-off switch of the endocannabinoid system gets confused. Our body's trying to auto-regulate. And before you know it, things start to break down. So basically, that's how I explain the endocannabinoid system. And when you see that whole umbrella, you can see when you're showering cannabinoids on your body, it's going to interact. So it's this intelligence of the plant. It goes where it needs to go. It does what it needs to do to bring about homeostasis or balance. So we talk about that in this segment about how traumatic brain injury can be helped using cannabis.
All right, guys. Well, it's a great segment. I learn a lot every day, and I'm always like, man, I need to change my diet. I need to do a few things differently. You know what I mean? Again, especially in lockdown, I think we're all kind of struggling to find our normality and our balance. And every day we're waiting for tomorrow to be like, hey, we can go back to the way it was, and we're allowed out, and we can go to the store, and we can, go hug each other again.
The big thing that people don't realize, this is probably one of the biggest when I'm educating health professionals and doctors, and is that every single thing that you do or don't do in your life affects your endocannabinoid system. It's either it supports it or it doesn't. And it's as simple as that. So that's really, really important for doctors to know, is what you're recommending or prescribing or telling patients to do, does that support the endocannabinoid system? And if it doesn't, well, what are the other choices? So it's really bringing that to the forefront.
You made a great point in the segment. I can't wait for people to hear it, but like, it's like, you know, we just have to be constantly reminded of the littlest things sometimes, because you're like, what you put in your mouth is what your body takes in, right? Like we talk about all the time. We worry so much about, we talk about our plants, right, Thomas, right? We worry about what we put in our plants all the time.
The nutrients.
But like
every day. Don't put the heavy metals into your soil. The plants will uptake it. You'll uptake it. Your endocannabinoid system won't like it, and you'll have a bad time.
Right, but then we'll go eat something from somewhere that will not really contribute to us, in any sort of medical benefit, right, or any fashions, right? So, you know, we talked about last week. We'll talk about probably again this week. You know, eating vegetables and raw plants and raw things and how that affects us. But here we go, guys. Another week of Can Talk with Sherry and Nurse Mark.
Yeah, so health awareness theme in January. One of the other health awareness themes is National Winter Sports Traumatic Brain Injury Awareness Month.
Yes.
Right.
And you know what? We have people in our lives, and we won't mention names. We have people in our lives that have suffered recent traumatic brain injuries with winter sports.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You know, interesting enough too is there's a nurse in the community. I just want to give a big shout out to her as well. Nikki Lawley. It's a pediatric nurse that basically suffered a traumatic brain injury, actually 3 of them. The last one that she suffered from was a work-related pediatric nurse. She got head-butted so bad that that was it. You know, she has a severe traumatic brain injury, and basically nothing worked. And cannabis.
It doesn't take much, right? Because how thin is that space between your skull and your brain? Your brain's just in this wash, kind of floating around inside.
Yeah.
Mushy. It's not solid, right? So when you get just the littlest thing, that impact.
Yeah. The bruised brain, and then what happens after. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the interesting thing too that I found about research is that research has shown that people who have a little bit of THC in their system at the time of injury are less likely to die than those who do not. So
there's some good research, and we're going to talk about it, Sherry, about how good cannabis is for the brain.
Just to review really quickly, traumatic brain injury is a brain dysfunction caused by an outside force, usually a violent blow or an injury to the head. Mm-hmm. The results, you know, it can be a result of severe sports injury, car accident, regular accidents, headbutting, you know, by accident. And there's 3 levels: mild, moderate, and severe.
Right.
So concussion has been known as being a mild traumatic brain injury. So it is still a traumatic brain injury.
It is. Your brain has still been injured.
Exactly. So there's 3, and we can go over them really quick. Mark, you want to go over them with me?
Sure. Ready? Let's go with mild traumatic brain injury symptoms. So loss of consciousness, you may or may not lose consciousness, being dazed or confused, dizziness or balance difficulties, weakness or numbness in the arms and the legs, headaches, nausea and vomiting, drowsiness or an increase in sleeping, which, you know, that's one of the things that you watch for when somebody has a traumatic brain injury and somebody hits their head. You really got to watch them for the next 24 hours for sleepiness. It's one of the things you really watch for. Sleep disruptions, restlessness, blurred vision, ringing in the ears, changes of smell, memory problems, difficulty concentrating, changes in mood, anxiety, and depression.
Really, really interesting. Really, the brain is so powerful. And just think of all the receptors that we have in our brain. The CB1 receptor is most abundant in our brain, which cannabinoids work. So the next one, moderate to severe traumatic brain injury. So just imagine all the symptoms that Mark just talked about, plus a lot of patients can have prolonged loss of consciousness, anywhere from minutes to hours. Patients have persistent worsening headaches that don't go away. Patients can have worsening nausea and vomiting. A lot of patients experience seizures, that pupil dilatation, so big giant pupils in one or both eyes. Some patients have experienced fluid coming out of their nose or ears, difficult walking, weakness in toes and fingers, numbness, tingling, coordination difficulties, extreme confusion, agitation, combativeness, slurring of speech, and coma. So that's severe.
Right.
Can you imagine a plant being able to truly help with that?
It truly can help. So what are some of the treatment modalities? Well, rest, number one. You really just need to rest. You can't tax your brain. You really shouldn't, you shouldn't be on the computer or reading, whatever. You should just rest. There's medication. There are some pharmaceutical medications that they'll give. Surgery. Sometimes if it's a severe traumatic brain injury, they might have to do surgery to correct any of the issues that are going on. And here's the big one, cannabinoids.
Yes. So here's the interesting thing too. So when people have traumatic brain injuries, oftentimes it is days after where people start to have worsening symptoms. So if you think about it, the body releases these toxic chemicals that can further be damaging the brain. So it causes this oxidative stress, the inflammation. The brain is constantly firing, right? And so oftentimes too, these can cause what they call a neural death, even after the person is stabilized. So this can cause more damage than actually the original injury. How cannabis as a treatment, okay, we'll talk about this now, we'll get into it, minimize secondary brain damage that happens after the original injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
It can interact with receptors that may help the body from releasing the cytokines which cause inflammation. Yeah.
Neuroprotectant, so here's the other thing too. What about the benefits of cannabinoids for symptom management? I mean, just think of that.
Just the symptoms themselves, not even, but the most important thing is, of course, the neuroprotection and the decrease of inflammation. But these other things, right? That's the beauty. That's the beauty and the amazing part of cannabis, right, Sherry? Is that it doesn't just do one specific thing. It'll hit like 4 or 5 things going on all at the same time.
So that's the part that's so interesting too about cannabinoids. If there's a benefit for symptom management, and just some of them, and you think about the umbrella concept. The umbrella, when we educate on the endocannabinoid system, is our body. All of the spokes of the umbrella represent different organ systems, body systems, and it just to show the interconnectedness of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically the benefits of using cannabinoids for symptom management to decrease nausea, improving people's appetite.
Right. Decrease depression. It'll improve your mood.
Decreasing anxiety. It will improve your mood even more.
Yes. And decrease insomnia. You get improved sleep. And let me tell you, you need to have good sleep.
Yeah.
So what types of cannabinoids are we going to be looking at when we're talking about treating or actually helping to alleviate some of the symptoms of a traumatic brain injury?
Well, we love whole plant, right? It has terpenes, it has all of the antioxidants, the bioflavonoids, the cannaflagens, right? All of that. But basically, we have both THC and CBD, but preferably CBD dominant. And this is because CBD interacts with so many of the brain neurotransmitter signaling systems.
Right.
Dopamine signaling, serotonin signaling, opioid signaling. THC works great too. But basically, studies have shown that the CBD dominant can be a little better, as well as with the terpenes, beta-caryophyllene and terpylene, which we talked about last week.
Yep, and THC and CBD mimic our internal endogenous cannabinoids, which can, again, prevent the release of cytokines. So cytokines are pro-inflammatory and they can cause increased damage to the brain. And again, Sherry talked about it earlier. It's not necessarily the original injury that's the problem. It's the following days afterwards where this continuation of, the body's reacting, trying to do the right thing, but it causes inflammation and that's more damage to the brain.
Yes. And so we have also this toxic molecule called glutamate that can be released. It decreases the glutamate, and this can be released after the traumatic brain injury. So the other thing too that THC and CBD can do is also reduce the swelling of the brain and any neurological impairment that may be occurring, and also reduces brain cell death.
Okay, other therapies, because you know what? We like to talk about all sorts of things that affect the endocannabinoid system, the ECS.
Yep. So diet, we always talk about diet. High fat, low carbohydrate, low sugar diet with plenty of leafy greens and omega oils, omega-3 oils, that DHA ratio, and fermented foods that have probiotics in them. Let's get back to the endocannabinoid system. Our enteric nervous system, which is our entire gastrointestinal tract, and our central nervous system interact with one another via the endocannabinoid system. So it makes sense that everything that you put into your mouth is going to affect your brain.
For folks who don't know, your enteric
nervous system
is your gut. It's all of the nerves and the nervous system associated with your gut, right?
From out,
and it operates on its own, by the way. If you happen to have an injury and you're brain dead, like you're clinically brain dead, your enteric nervous system is still operating 100% just fine on its own. So when somebody says trust your gut feeling, you better, because it's actually a thing.
It's a thing. And it's just so fascinating. So other things that can complement traditional therapies and cannabinoids are nutritional supplements and antioxidants. Specifically magnesium, vitamin D, curcumin, glutathione, and melatonin to restore circadian rhythm and sleep.
And of course, acupuncture and neurofeedback. Those are two other modalities that'll work really, really well.
You or someone you love is suffering from chronic illness, you or someone you love is interested in learning how to incorporate cannabis into a wellness regimen, or if you or someone you love is interested in having an adult use safe recreational experience, reach out to us. We're so happy to educate you and empower you to use this plant in the best way possible for you.
Yes. You know what? If you're a healthcare provider, anywhere in the healthcare spectrum, we talk about all these different modalities, acupuncture, massage, anywhere where if you're helping people to be healthy, join us. We need you in the community. We need your energy. We need you here, and we will help you understand how to integrate cannabis into your practice.
Absolutely.
Join us, the Green Nurse. All right, folks, much love. Happy Inauguration Day.
All right, another great educational episode there with the Green Nurse. You guys talk about a lot, so it's hard to put all this information into a shorter segment. We try to shoot for short, but it always ends up long, right? Because stuff that I think people need to talk about, especially with traumatic brain injuries, things like that. I was going to talk about a lot of the guests we have coming up on the show. We have a lot of cool guests coming on, guys. We have Nikki Lawley coming on, who you mentioned in your video, which I'm really excited to talk about, who suffered from a few of them being a nurse, right? So she's somebody who's suffered a couple injuries being a nurse, working in the field and having some brain injuries, and she's a big cannabis supporter now. She has an amazing story. You've talked to her before. I'm really excited to talk to her. She's coming up. Another person I'm really excited to talk to is Chris Thistle. So here's somebody, again, from the nurse side. If you guys don't know who Chris Thistle is, Thistle Therapies is out of Mass, New England based. And he's doing some great things, and he's really doing what we all talk about, is trying to isolate some unique cannabinoids and really going for those types of patient-focused medications as isolations and collaborations, and then, the blends that we talked about before, what I mean? Really trying to, work
blends
they need, right? And then another one that I'm really excited about was Sister Suzanne, who's the nun, right? Who everybody, I can't wait because she's an older woman, which is great because, older woman nun, right? Like, how much more stigmas could you ever have against cannabis in your life? And here's somebody, again, who's for cannabis.
You
going to
froze.
have Jason L. Straw on. Oh, did I come back? I'm back. All right.
Yeah, you're back.
So we're going to have Jason L. Straw on, guys, who, if you guys haven't heard his story yet, I came across his story recently. I was really blown away by it. I'm not 100% sure on, and I did a quick little bit of research. There's not a lot out there on, but so he was a critical care nurse for the U.S. Air Force. He's also a cardiopulmonary nurse consultant. So he's done a lot of great things, especially with lungs. He's been a nurse, and he was, if I remember the story right, injured on a ton of opioids. And got off from using cannabis, so now he's a huge supporter of cannabis and is doing a bunch of great things in Indiana. So we'll have him on as well. So we're gonna have a bunch of great guests on to share their stories and share from both sides, right? From the nursing side and the health benefit sides. We're also have Magic Man on. Big shout out to Magic Man here coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to learn about how to make edibles, guys. In Vermont, they create some of the best edibles I've ever had. So we love Meredith and Nick and that whole team over there. Aaron, big shout out to those guys for everything that they're doing. Opening a new business in spite of COVID, which is a huge test of someone's nature and character right now, because of all the confusion and all the who knows what the hell's going to happen tomorrow and what they're doing. But they've created a unique space for events, education.
First cannabis cafe in Vermont. First cannabis cafe in Vermont.
Yes, I love it. So we'll have them on as well. So a big shout out to those guys. And now one of the things I want to talk to Tim about. As we're going on here, was the new FDA regulations, right? Beth, I'd love to hear your input on this, and Tom as well, because these are what impacts our industry the most. Sherry, obviously the floor is open, but for this, the FDA regulations, I mean, I've mentioned it before. We had a couple of messages reach out to us about the 1%, you know what I mean, and what that implied. And and the way they word it on a lot of these articles is really kind of unique and awkward, and it kind of leaves another gray area for me. So I was like, I can't wait to talk to Tim about this. He's ballpark. So, let's talk about these new regulations that just came out.
I preface this: you win some, you lose some. If the article I'm writing, that's the headline right there. You win some, you lose some. There were some provisions that are better than the IFR, and there are some provisions they refuse to change, which are going to ultimately prove very difficult for a lot of states to come into compliance with, Vermont included. Thankfully, you're probably not going to go to jail if your test lands up to test 0.5 now. But we're sticking, they have stuck to this total THC threshold of 0.3 for viability, and that is going to be incredibly difficult for the industry to come to terms with. Ultimately, are they going to be able to, by use of really selective genetics and working it out? People hope. But it's going to pose a lot of problems. When you start adding that THCA into the equation and require a 0.3 for viability, I mean, it's great that they extended the, accidental or they imply criminal intent to 0.5 now. That's awful generous of them, even up to 1%. That doesn't mean you can grow 1%. That means that they won't pursue criminal charges against a hemp grower that happens to go a little hot. But that still needs to be destroyed, mitigated. Plus, the DEA laboratory requirement is going to cause quite a bit of problems. So, I think it's definitely better than we were at. I think there still needs a lot of work to go. What a lot of people are wondering, the big open question is, with a new USDA head, with a new administration, could that final rule potentially be altered? The other thing to remember is that this is the 2018 Farm Bill we're talking about. That's up in 2022. So next year, they're going to be re-looking at the Agricultural Improvement Act again. So, it seems like, this is Farm Bill we keep talking about is now almost 3 years old. So that could also have a opportunity to revise some of the less desirable components of the final rule. But like I said, it's better than it was. So we're getting there.
Well, now I read an article, and this is going to be of interest, and I don't know if Thomas saw this article because it's going to impact people on all levels. I think was the vape cartridges, right? Because they've amended those laws as well when they did their refinance bill, correct?
With what are you talking about?
With shipping, with the packaging and shipping, the United States. I'm trying to find the article now. Is just looking at it too, which is kind of bumming me out. But the United States Postal Service said they weren't going to be able to ship these anymore. So it's more to do with the vape cart issue in the United States more than it has to do with the cannabis vape carts, but it's going to have an effect.
You stumped me for once. That one I'm not familiar with.
It's because of like all the states that have like flavor bans and stuff now. Now the post office is refusing to ship any sort of vaping products and cartridges because they don't want to be violating any sort of laws by providing consumers products, as well as don't want any involvement in any future issues that might result again based on the vaping issues that we've had with cartridges previously due to faulty cartridges and bad products going into them.
Right. Thank you, Thomas. I'm trying to find the article. I don't know where the hell it went. I only have about 90 pages open today, so it's, we're working on a bunch of projects. No, basically, Thomas, you're right. It's more to do with them passing on the vaping crisis, right? We've seen that there's not allowing any of the flavored additives anymore, right? But now it comes to an issue of just shipping any sort of vape products now. So, we're seeing a lot of these, the CBD industry freaking out because of the availability of shipping carts, which, as we know, has been a huge part of our industry for a long time now, right? And up until the vape cart industry was the number one method of consumption, I believe, and then one of the number one, sales revenue generators in cannabis, right? Was vape carts. Everybody has one. It's easy. We can go anywhere. Like we said, we can walk down the street. We can walk down the hallway. People in movie theaters. It doesn't matter. It's easy, and it's not as obvious as other methods of smoking. Like, if we smoke a joint, like you were mentioning, the smells, right? When people can smell us walking into a room, and everybody kind of smiles and like, oh, that guy's high, or people will comment on it. But it was more of an issue of that, and I just want to touch base on that, how you felt about that impact in our industry. If I find that article, we'll touch base back on it, because again, it's something I want to talk about with you.
I think, adult use cartridges couldn't be mailed anyway. Nor medical, because that's, again, cannabis federal prohibition. So we're just talking about CBD cartridges being in the mail. And, this is a result of what happened. I don't like the word crisis, vape crisis. I think that's a little overly dramatic. There was last year an issue of vitamin E acetate being added to vape cartridges in order to thicken the oil, where people didn't realize that when they heated vitamin E acetate heats to a certain level, it releases toxic chemicals and you can die. There was a rash of bad cartridges. There were couple hundred deaths, I believe. They figured it out pretty relatively quickly, stopped it, and people stopped putting vitamin E acetate. There was a couple raids in California, and it was bad. The impact of that you're even seeing now, though. All of a sudden, you've got vape taxes, you've got, everybody going after the industry. This is one of the dangers of a lack of, a regulation. This is the dangers of a lack of a national system of measurement, of laboratory requirements, of testing, of standardization that we talk about all the time. If we had and treated, whether it's CBD cartridges, whether it's adult THC cartridges, whether it's Delta 8 cartridges that are starting to come out now, if we had a nationalized standard like they do with alcohol. I always come back to this. I hate alcohol, but I love the standardization. 80 proof is an 80 proof bottle of liquor. You know what's in it. You know it's safe. You know it does not have isopropyl alcohol in it. You're not going to go blind from drinking a bottle of Absolute. There are standards. If we had that same acceptance, that same national standards to be able to apply to the CBD and to the cannabis industry as a whole, we wouldn't have these problems with the vape cartridges. When I get a vape cartridge now, I know who manufactured it. I know it's good. I know it's solid. But your average consumer does not. They don't know. And vape in particular is a very wide market. You can use very cheap Chinese pieces to create your cartridge, which have sometimes mercury, sometimes lead, sometimes just flicking off paint. We don't know the heating elements. Maybe they're ceramic, but maybe they're not. Maybe you can use cheap materials for actors in the space who don't have morals about that. And it is very difficult, if not impossible, for the consumer to be able to identify that. Especially the uninformed consumer, so that those two things add up to a really dangerous situation, which I think we saw at its peak during the vitamin E acetate. But that by no means, there are people who are sucking on vape cartridges that are releasing small amounts of toxic metals into their blood system that they may not notice. It may not kill you overnight. It may not kill you at all, but it's certainly not good for your health. And there's no real way to know without regulation and standardization. So.
And that right there, Tim, is exactly why whenever a hemp farmer complains to me about the price of having to test at the end of the season, I complain to them about how the laws are not strict enough and how we're not testing for enough, because there's so much that we could be testing for. Yes, I agree. Some of these testing prices are high. Some of the labs could do to bring their prices down a little bit, but it is what it is. And in my opinion, the testing is 100% absolutely necessary across the board, not just for cannabinoids, but also for your pesticides, also for your heavy metals, etc. I don't want any cadmium. I don't want any arsenic in anything that I'm consuming, whether it's cannabis or otherwise. So if I'm going to be consuming corn or if I'm going to be consuming a potato, I want to know what's in it. I want to know what's in my cannabis too.
Hemp's a bioaccumulator. So it's soaking up anything in the ground that's near it. It's going to absorb it. I mean, it's used as a, remedial crop for, contaminated areas because it acts so well as a bioaccumulator. On the flip side of that is if you're growing it in an area that you have not tested your soil, or that is leaching in by some sort of pollution, or grown in a mass Chinese field that just doesn't care, it's really important to have those testing done because you're a crop that sucks that stuff in naturally. I mean, that's what it does. So it makes
that's been my question. We've talked to a lot of people on the show about soil remediations and farmers and scientists about what is that plant, what does that plant take up? What does it release back into wherever after utilizing it, and what does it hold on to? It's like what ends up in that flower, right? So something that is used for soil remediation, is that a product that can be smoked or be processed down?
You wouldn't want to be smoking the hemp they're planting around Chernobyl.
Yeah, when it comes to anything radioactive, heavy metals, that sort of thing, when you try to process it, you're concentrating the heavy metals, you're concentrating the radioactive material. So even if you're able to get most of it out, there's still, unless you're a really, really good lab, there's still a pretty good chance that there's going to be something left in it that's going to make somebody sick.
But that's easy to identify. It's the stuff when there's levels that are small, that it wasn't used for remediation, it wasn't used for that, but its bioaccumulation properties caused it to absorb a small amount. Consumer needs to know that. It's not even a question, the possibility alone merits that testing, and that testing needs to occur. And Tom, it does stink right now. And this is the problem with the onset of any new industry. There's not a lot of competition. Not a lot of competition means high prices. It's expensive because these labs are just learning themselves. They're figuring out how to do these tests. There hasn't been the time to learn how to streamline them effectively, how to, be able to cut the costs, be able to, have that competition, be able to come up with new technology to be able to conduct these tests quicker and faster and less costly. That will come. That's a natural progression of the industry. I believe that we will see. We will see the ingenuity that we've seen permeate this industry continue. And we're going to see testing costs come down, and we're going to see accuracy go up, and we're going to see what I believe within 5 to 10 years, a test that farmers can use themselves during the cycle to be able to spot test and be able to both identify THC content, CBD content, and any potential contaminants. These things are coming, and we can't. I wish they were here now, and the cost is tough, especially for startups. Where we represent quite a few very small mom and pop hemp operations that those costs can be exorbitant. It's part of the growing industry, and it's one of those painful things that we have to get through, and I do believe will improve.
Literally, as you mentioned that, Tim, there was an article in the last couple of days. Again, I don't know why I can't find any of my articles today. It was basically about that. It wasn't something I was going to talk to you guys or bring up too much, but it was about a test that they just figured out how to test the terpenes and the cannabinoids at the same time, because as we most of us know, that's not available right now, right? So it's two separate tests. It gets very costly at that point. That's where, like you're saying, Tim, it's like when we start talking about the full panel testing, which is something that me and Thomas and all of us here have been rallying for years. And it's not just testing for cannabinoids or your THC content, right? It's actually full panel. So you can actually get tested on the pesticides and the metals that your plants are uptaking, because those are the things that actually have the biggest impact, especially on patients, right?
Absolutely.
I wish I could find the article, because it's another great article. But anyways, one of the big things I did want to talk to you guys about, and we have Beth on the show today, and what's been a unique conversation in a lot of the areas is about delivery services in Massachusetts, right? So there's a big issue going on in Mass right now where they passed the delivery service or allowing deliveries, and you can apply for a license, which is a licensable thing, and the as always, the dispensaries don't like it, right? So the dispensaries are fighting it, right? So there's a lot of things going on in Mass. Tim, we've seen this working in a lot of states. We talk about it a lot, where some states have delivery, some states do not. And then with curbside and all these things, how much of an impact can this have on Massachusetts, right? Especially because the delivery systems there, if I'm correct, Beth, right, are supposed to be separate from the dispensaries, correct?
It's a different license type.
Yeah. So, but will that allow the dispensaries in Mass to apply for those licenses as well? So they
Eventually, the way it is right now in the Commonwealth, the CDA, the Cannabis Dispensary Association, I can't even remember, was it the Commonwealth Dispensary Association? I think that's what it is.
Yep.
So the association, on behalf of its members, is suing the CCC to try to take back, some of that market share, that early market share. Certainly dispensaries spend a ton of money getting up and running these past several years, because that's what it took. So it's, you can certainly see that, wow, it's a little unfair to them, but for me, it's not unfair, or it's very unfair the way people were treated. Black people, Hispanics in particular, they were targeted by police, targeted by enforcement. They haven't had the same opportunities to get to the places where they would be able to have millions of dollars or access to the millions of dollars that it would take to start a dispensary. So my understanding is that, obviously this is going to be a long discussion, and particularly like litigation could be very drawn out. I hope that these smaller businesses, these economic empowerment applicants, are able to get up and running, and before any sort of big, situation with litigation puts any sort of pause on things. Anything that any business can do to help pave the way for the folks that the state has deemed like deserve an extra chance here. I'm all for that. I'd love to use the analogy about pie when, dispensaries are, nervous about somebody taking their piece of the pie, but it's not a pie. There's something for everybody. And at the end of the day, if you're creating good products and you're running a good business and you're treating your people well, that's how you're going to survive, not because you chopped out competition. I think those that fear competition do so because they know they're doing something wrong. So again, the CDA is suing the CCC on behalf of its members. However, my understanding is that there was never a vote.
Well, my unique question is this, and that is where I spoke to Tim on the legality of all this, because I read this article and I was kind of shocked, because the first thing that hit me, and I'm glad you mentioned it, was the social and economically impacted people, right? So literally, the licenses go to these people first, right? So we've had a big
issue. Just this one type of license. Just this one type of license.
Right. So, which is unique because there's two licenses offered, right? So for me, I'm reading this, I'm going, isn't this how these dispensaries got their licenses, because they were supposed to support social and economical impact? People have been.
So I can see how that's somewhat separate. Full disclosure, I've done some work with a multi-state operator, so I've been on the inside of these things. And the license, anybody who's applying for a license, whether it's delivery, cultivation, or you want to have a store, you have to submit a positive impact plan and a diversity plan as part of your business application, right? But there isn't any sort of criteria necessarily that you have to meet. The CCC isn't saying, okay, X dollars or X percent needs to do this and that. It's really on the business themselves to put forth what they want to do. And I understand that, some companies have been denied based on their kind of, not good enough PIPs, positive impact plans. But then I've also seen others, and you can look at these right on the CCC website where all these applications are public documents. You can look at any one of these dispensaries positive impact plan, and I'm going to guess that most of them had nothing to do with delivery at the time that they were setting up. And made no sorts of promises to the CCC relating specifically to delivery. On the other side, it's doing things within their local communities where they're operating, hiring plans, working with organizations like an Elevate to support community outreach and support the destigmatization. There isn't they have to do something for everybody. It's kind of like put your plan and the CCC decides.
Looks like we might have lost Joe.
He'll
be back. Okay. It always takes him a minute. He disappears. He comes right back. But in reality, I think what you're doing, Beth, is amazing. I think a lot of people need the guidance. A lot of people need the consulting assistance in that respect. And the fact that you're aiming primarily towards women is fantastic, because I don't think there's enough women that put themselves out in the industry. There's plenty of women that are fantastic growers, but The only ones I see bouncing around and showing themselves off online and stuff are the guys. That's, well, for two reasons. Number one, the women that actually know what they're doing don't really care to flaunt it because they already know. And number two, I think it has a lot to do with just the impact in not just the cannabis industry, but all industries in general. You know, working in an office, I saw the same thing you mentioned, you know, with men being treated differently than women in the office space, women having to work harder for certain things, etc. So in that respect, I think it's fantastic. And I can't wait to see more women-run businesses coming out.
Oh, thanks. It's also different for women because of the stigma. You know, women generally are moms, and you know, they're held to kind of a different regard than men are. We can't get away with as much stuff as men can because it's not ladylike, it's not motherly, it's not proper. You know, it's just different expectations, I think, for women just baked into our culture. But again, for me, where like I think a big thing for me was where I wasn't a mom, I kind of felt a responsibility to, you know, speak up where I could, because it broke my heart that there were people that had passion, had skills, had interest, were, you know, looking forward to the future for their families, but just felt stifled by stigma. So that's heartbreaking.
I've always been impressed because you don't do what you do for money. You don't do it for the fame. You don't do it, you know, just to be up there. Every time I've seen you, you've been working with so many different people. You've brought so many people to the table. The networking, it just blows my mind. Every time I see you at a convention, you know, you're inspiring people all around you. And
you too, though.
No, it's always impressed me about you, Beth. I really love it. So many people in this industry, honestly, you know, they're in there for the money. They're at the end of the day, they think they can.
I still have to pay my bills too, you know.
Yeah, we all have to pay our bills, but you know, it's clear that's not your prime motivator. And that really has always impressed me.
Oh, thank you. No, I say all the time that I think anybody who wants to make a dollar in this industry has a responsibility to give a dollar back to those who either were affected by prohibition or folks who are just like steps behind because of the way they were or where they were raised and kind of the environment of you know, law enforcement there. So I just feel like everybody has a responsibility, whether you're a licensee or you're an ancillary business like me doing marketing services. You know, if you want to profit, you need to understand the history, and you know, putting people and planet before profit is just kind of something that's going to resonate with buyers too. You know, people are more woke than ever about different issues relating to race and even just cannabis and sustainability, environment. Like, our industry is terrible to the environment. But, you know, businesses, I think, can differentiate themselves by, you know, really knowing who they are and putting it out there and, you know, taking a stand on certain things. And certainly that's going to alienate some people, but it's also going to, you know, attract the people that, you know, hopefully are good folks that just want to enjoy some good weed and help create a better world. So hopefully we're all doing that.
Back, Joe, welcome back.
Welcome.
Joe,
Mr. Smith.
Welcome to your show.
So pleased to welcome you.
So happy to have you back. We just can't see you.
Oh, Joe.
That's because he's still frozen. He's slowly making his way back in.
Oh, all right, that's good. That's good.
It's our high-tech Vermont internet, you know.
Oh, man,
Gotta love it.
It's
been like every time you get on a Zoom, it's like, oh, is this going to be the one where I just get a horrible freeze frame of like a terrible? We've all seen it. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Hey.
Usually it never catches me on my best angle, as we all know.
Right.
So I'm back. I don't know where we left off. I don't want to shift gears too harshly, but the one thing I did want to talk about was the California banking that's going on, right? So they released the availability of using a credit union, right? How much of an impact does this have for California? I mean, can one credit union handle all this? I mean, this could be exponentially huge for them, especially when collecting and being able to utilize deposits in a bank, right? Payments.
So I'm not totally familiar with this, Tim. I'm going to say any sort of little, you know, creepy little crack of access is only going to be good for everybody. So,
right.
Tim,
you know, what I want to remind you is that banks can bank the cannabis industry. Banks can bank the cannabis industry. This is a fact. FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Network of, you know, the enforcement arm of the Department of Treasury, that, you know, is the ultimate arbitrator in any bank, you know, has put out guidelines and says, yes, you can bank the cannabis industry with a giant asterisk. of if you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, keep these accounts completely separate. Make sure, they are personally reviewed every week. Every SAR that's supposed to be filed needs to be filed. So they're incredibly arduous, but they are there. So banks can choose to bank the cannabis industry, and as long as they check off all of these boxes that FinCEN has told them to check off, they're safe from federal prosecution. The problem is twofold. A, it's incredibly expensive because it does require these accounts to be kept completely separate and reviewed completely separate from all the other bank business. And two, liability. What happens if they make a mistake? What happens if they don't file a proper SAR on time? Not through any intentional deception, but just accidentally, as they take on this new industry. So you've got the potential risk of liability for making a mistake, coupled with an incredibly expensive regulatory regime that you need to follow for this. So that's why a lot of banks are saying no, but they are able to, should they choose to, and why we have seen several banks. Now, California is setting up the state, and the state saying you can bank. I don't clear it under the feds. I mean, theoretically, that's California state law. That's California state regulators. The Safe Banking Act. This is one answer that states are trying to come up with. Everyone's trying to scramble. Nobody wants this to be a cash business. No one wants this to be a cash industry. It's atrocious to keep it as a cash industry. California is, Christ, look at the size of their economy. Having this as an all cash industry. People have tried runarounds, have tried loop arounds. Okay, we're going to do a credit card transaction to cash, and then you're going to put it in that other machine. Then you're going to look around, and then something's going to spit out under there, and you're going to take that, and it's a coupon. And, they've tried all these runarounds to try to get past the bans to make this less cash intensive. This is a good step toward it. I want to see a Safe Banking Act passed. I want to see, they passed it in the House. We've got the majority in the Senate now. That would alleviate a lot of the concern on the part of the financial institutions. That would take away the arduous, requirements. That will, some of them, I'm sure there'll still be plenty in place, but it won't be nearly as extreme. And you'll take away that liability. You'll take away that risk of federal prosecution if you didn't happen to dot the right I. That, again, financial institutions are conservative by nature. They don't want to risk their other depositors. They don't want to risk their certification. They've got regulators that they need to deal with. And the Safe Banking Act passing with a federal stamp of approval on the industry for states that have passed it, is going to provide the protection that I believe to see a lot more financial institutions jump in. So it's good that California got this thing up and running. It's good to see that support. We need the Safe Banking Act to pass. And this is just another illustration of why.
When we talk about the Safe Banking Act and we talk about the Senate, right? Obviously, today we start a whole new administration in our government, right? What are the realistics of timing on this for these guys to sit down and get back in office and look at this? This isn't something that's going to happen in the next couple of days, correct?
Between cleaning up the mess of the last 4 years and the, pandemic going on, there are going to be some priorities that honestly I have to agree probably take precedence over cannabis policy. But that's not to say we're just not going to hear or see anything about it. The industry is moving forward with New Jersey now, in the process of establishing their legal market, with New York, Pennsylvania, likely within the next year or two to also pass, which then will cause Connecticut and everybody else, Virginia. Now, this is something that the feds are going to have to deal with sooner rather than later. I don't see we're going to see full legalization, but the Safe Banking Act is a safe bet to be the first piece of legislation that will probably make it over the finish line. Just being that it doesn't really tacitly endorse legalization. It's not pro or against. It just says we don't want this to be a cash industry anymore, and we want people to be able to get paychecks and deposit money in banks. And, track it. All the bad things we said that were going to happen, we're allowing to flourish because it's a cash-only industry. So I do think we're going to see that. Will it happen this year? Hopefully. I think it can get through now without too much back and forth, especially if, we've got the votes. Do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No. Would I like to see it happen before the end of this session? Yeah. Do I think the MORE Act's going to pass this session? No. I think that's too comprehensive. It has too many moving parts to it. I think that could take, maybe next session. But I do have hope, because people call me overly optimistic, that we'll see the Safe Banking Act get through at some point.
Right. I know a lot of people are, we're seeing things like in Arizona where they actually might be able to be legal in another couple of days here, according to some of the articles I've read. But one of the other things I want to talk to you about, which interested me too, because we talk about legalities, laws, constitutions, things like that. Idaho may be blocking future legalization with a constitutional, basically an amendment, right? So how?
What's wrong with Idaho? Like, what do they have against weed? I would think if you're out in Idaho, it's beautiful. You're like a libertarian. Everybody's doing their own thing. There's mountains and streets. I don't know what Idaho has against weed, man. But yeah, they don't like hemp. They don't like cannabis. They don't like CBD. None of it. Maybe, I don't know anything about Idaho politics. Good. At this point, it's like, listen, if a state chooses to outlaw tomatoes, do you really want to fight them, or are you just not going to go to that state if you like tomatoes? It doesn't make any sense. And you would hope that if the people care enough about it, they'll vote out whatever administration tries to do this, vote in a new one, change. But at this point, it's like, I'm very much in support of the MORE Act. If the state wants to keep it illegal, fine. No problem. Let the states do what they want. Laboratories of democracy. That's the whole point of what we are here, So if Idaho chooses to keep it illegal, good. Go ahead. I'm not going to Idaho. And that's just kind of reality. I don't want to force anybody to have to do, and that's just as bad as forcing them not to. Nobody's forcing anything here. It's a personal choice. Let the population, let the people of the state make a decision if they think it's right or wrong. But where this animosity in Idaho comes towards cannabis, it blows my mind. I can't help but think it's a select group of politicians that are in place, maybe in the legislature, maybe the current governor. I don't know the first thing about it. I don't care to waste the brain space learning it either.
They don't want to lose money on all their potato stocks.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Christ, I'm out there freaking farming potatoes all day. I'm smoking too.
When they know a constitutional amendment, you know what I mean? It's like how, like you said, it's agricultural. It's these things that can fall.
I don't know, economic influences. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never even heard or read like a valid reason why. It just one of those. You got me, man. I really don't know why they hate pot so much, but they really do.
Well, here's another you got me is that I saw in the news this week. Sherry had caught wind of it. She's promoted it on their pages, and it's gotten a lot of traction. It's a very interesting article. I think a lot of people had to reread it a couple times because as we sit here with Sherry and the Green Nurses, and we brought nurses on. We've had last week we had Dr. Kevin Spellman on, just an amazing gentleman, right? An article comes out that the American Medical Association asked a court to overturn the medical marijuana vote in Mississippi, right? Citing that it's dangerous to someone's health, right? And then I read another article released right after that, actually smoking cannabis is better for you than most other anything, right? I'm going to find the article in a minute, but I want Sherry to touch base on this. I want to hear Tim's reaction to this, because isn't this kind of like, we talk about research, we talk about the support, we talk about all these things, and we have, again, this huge nationwide, medicinal support of cannabis. Now we have the American Medical Association trying to overturn.
Massachusetts. Well, then we have American Medical Association here in Massachusetts. Did you just see the recent article that was just posted? Mm-hmm. So, and then we have. So this is when I'm working with health professionals and when I'm educating them. I said, just because you didn't learn about it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I didn't learn about it either, and just because you can't find the research doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Number two. Right. And then the third thing I said is that you have a moral, legal, ethical obligation as a physician, as a health practitioner, as a nurse, as a clinician, to learn about this most important system that exists in human bodies, because every single thing that you tell your patient to do or not do affects that system. And if you're telling your patient to do something that isn't going to support the endocannabinoid system, you need to have an option, or you need to have a way to mitigate that side effect. So it's really, truly, truly about education. I think what's going on in Mississippi is it's horrible. And I think a lot of it too has to do because they're just not taking the time to learn. The other important factor is a lot of the physicians that I've worked with and I've educated with and have actually tried to help them to be able to certify. One of them I worked with for a year, and he couldn't wait to do this. But when he found out, and I truly didn't know this was going to happen, that he had to stop he was going to lose his Medicare prescribing rights if he Okay, I didn't know that. So he basically learned, I spent like once a week with him, literally going out to lunch, teaching, educating. And I didn't even know that. I didn't know that if he was to start to prescribing, you know, or to certify patients, that he would lose his Medicare prescribing rights and he would have to stop taking care of the patients that he already takes care of. That is a shame. You know, and so that totally breaks my heart. So yeah, so I truly think that's what's going on, is it just needs to shift. And the other important thing too, when I'm educating professionals, is that nurses are the most trusted profession for 18 years in a row. And the National Council State Boards of Nursing in 2018, and for people that don't know what that is, the National Council State Boards of Nursing is the nursing regulatory body that provides licensure for all nurses. So every state, they have a regulatory body, and nurses must take an exam in order to get licensed. So they came out with a call to action in 2018 that all nurses, all advanced practice nurses, and all nursing students must have 6 essential clinical areas of knowledge when it comes to cannabinoid therapeutics. So that's really, really powerful. And I have that booklet. It's a 64-page booklet. I've made copies. I have it in a PDF, and I hand it out. You know, because it's truly, once you go down that rabbit hole, there's no going back. You can't unlearn this. Once you learn this, you can't unlearn it. And we truly have an obligation to get the information out there.
Right. Now, Tim, last thing I want to talk to you about real quick, New Hampshire, right? I saw a great article, Marijuana Moment, posted a couple of days ago about their legalization and the effort that's going on there. We've talked about it a few times. Just want to touch base on it again, because obviously, you know, new year, new administration, and things are, you know, they're hoping to go different ways in New Hampshire. But what is the reality in New Hampshire right now?
You know, Matt Simon would probably be a much better person to ask this, because he's on boots on the ground in New Hampshire all the time. But, you know, it's the same thing that every state comes up with, and that is there are still a significant amount of prohibitionists, and they are often, unfortunately, concentrated in decision-making bodies, such as legislatures. You know, New Hampshire's, I'm not saying it's a Republican state, certainly not Mississippi or Alabama, but there is a strong conservative bent in New Hampshire. It's more rural. They have a Republican governor that is absolutely against this. They have a legislature that is not supportive of it. You know, they did have a Democratic legislature. It swung back to the Republicans this last vote, but there's never been a strong, real incentive. And from what Matt tells me, there are a few well-placed politicians in state government that are just ardent prohibitionists, that are just stymieing and, you know, every effort. And it's gotten farther, and it's made steps. You know, their governor, Sununu, has vowed to veto any legislation, so that takes a lot of, you know, wind out of the sails. You would need a veto for majority if you actually realistically want to get something over the, you know, line. So, you know, I think it really comes down to, you know, if you had a governor in New Hampshire who was very supportive, who was really pushing this strongly, if you had a, you know, a legislature that was, you know, motivated to get this through. Could you get it through? Could you get it past the stumbling blocks? Maybe. But when you got a governor that doesn't want it, when you've got entrenched politicians that don't support it, when you've got a lukewarm, rusty legislature that's just not going to really make this a priority, and that comes from voters. You know, ultimately, if the voters wanted this and really pushed it and really made this a major issue, you would see progress. It hasn't been a major electoral issue. Therefore, it's just kind of stalled. Every time I talk to Matt, he just, he looks very, very, very worn whenever we discuss New Hampshire. And for those of you who may not know, Matt Simon is the Marijuana Policy Project New England coordinator or political, he's the MPP guy up here, and he's fantastic. I mean, he's really amazing in terms of his knowledge and his what he has accomplished. But New Hampshire seems to be the one that's, you know, it's the sticking point. How long does it go now that Vermont's going to be having an industry, and Massachusetts and Maine? You know, in one way that could, you know, try to encourage them to move forward, and the other they could say, you know what, it's legal everywhere else. Great, let them go there. We're just going to stay our island of prohibition here. Okay.
But live free or die.
Beth, I don't know if you're their neighbor. You have any input here?
It just kills me to hear about New Hampshire because their state motto is live free or die. It's like,
it makes no sense.
Well, I was born and raised in New Hampshire, and it's really unique. And even like with like traffic laws and there's a lot of unique laws in New Hampshire that are very strict, right? I was hoping that I'd hear your input on this, Beth, because I mean, as you know, a New Englander, basically, you know, we're all kind of like, you know, brothers and sisters here. It's unique what's going on in New Hampshire, right? And you working in the industry, do you work with people from New Hampshire? Any businesses?
No, not even
Right,
conversations about expanding there or interest there. All I hear about New Hampshire is everybody white knuckling it between Massachusetts and Maine.
Can I carry CBD in New Hampshire? I don't know. Probably not a good idea.
Right. So I believe you're allowed to carry up to 2 ounces if you're a patient in New Hampshire or transport it through. But yeah, the laws are so unique and awkward. And even when they were trying to go through legalization, they even tried to, you know, vote it around the governor because, you know, Kristen Inu there, people don't know, is you know, adamantly against legalization in any form, right? Medicinally in any aspect. But we do have a small medicinal program there, which is unique. Now, Beth, again, get back to you. We're getting close to the end of the show here, so I don't want to go too far over because we still got to get to Thomas, and he's got a great segment for us this week as well. But you know, for you, you know, in spite of everything going on, what do you have to say to people right now, especially during COVID? Is it time to wait and be patient, or do we just go all in? I mean, it seems like the numbers are there. It seems like the business is there, right?
Oh yeah, if you have any sort of inclination to get into the industry, like I was saying earlier, the competition is only going to increase. The genie's not getting stuff back in the bottle. Legalization is here. It's only going to spread. So if you have ambitions to start a business in your home state, or you want to start a brand that could have, you know, national reach, like now's the time to get started and start building your brand and building that trust with your consumers. And likewise, if you just want a job in cannabis, you know, it's pretty well accepted. Certainly family relationships and personal relationships can get weird. But a few years ago, you know, I was pretty much convinced that once I went into cannabis, there was no going back. But now I can see, if I ever were inclined, you know, the law firms and businesses that I would have worked for in the past, they're starting cannabis practices. Or, you know, there's different ways to, you know, consult maybe part-time. So I really feel that now, like you can go back, you can do cannabis, you can come back. Because at some point, again, this is just gonna be a normal industry like everything else. It really is. You know, we still have to pay taxes as business operators here. We still have to take care of our employees. At the end of the day, it's just, you know, this plant is a little bit different and people are catching up in different ways about it. But this is a real business, real industry. And, you know, now's the time. If it wasn't last week, you know, do it now. And if Elevate can be of any help or reach out to me, I love helping people, you know, because I just feel so passionate about this and the way cannabis changed my life. You know, again, paying it forward is, I guess, kind of a responsibility.
Was Elevate doing a job fair, virtual job fair? Was that what's going on?
We did one with MCR Labs in December, right at the beginning of December, and that went really well. I actually owe MCR an email response back to talk about the next one. Thank you for the reminder.
Right, so those are unique opportunities that also you can find on the internet now, guys, is people are doing job fairs, and you can find virtually, which is really unique because a lot of people have the internet networks and connections to people throughout the industry. So if you are interested in getting into a position, you know, I mean, just go out there, man, and walk in the door and introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm Joe Smith and I want to get a job. Where do I start? You guys have anything open? And just get involved any way you would anywhere else, right? And if you have a profession that has anything to benefit, reach out to Beth, right? Because there's ways that, you know, any industry can get involved in this industry. You just don't have to be a grower.
It touches everything. It touches everything. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? And with the way the industry is going between medical and recreational, it's going to be one of our biggest industries. It's going to require needs from every angle and every aspect, whether you're a grower, whether you're a nurse, whether you're in PR, even management, right? Social media management's another big thing, whether you're in law, whether you're in shipping, trucking, banking, insurance. Like, you know, hopefully soon we'll see the insurance gates open up so people can afford their medicine. We hear too many stories about people just can't afford medicine right now. And it sucks because I can go get opioids with a prescription and insurance, but I can't get cannabis. But we're almost there. We're getting it. We're getting close. With that being said, right?
I feel it. I see it.
Yeah, hopefully. And thanks to people like you that are very involved in making huge strides and spreading the word. We're getting there, right? And hopefully shows like this have an impact for people, and they can learn and they can get inspired to take that step, right? That's all we can ask for. Or reach out or to talk to any of us here, which are very easily accessible on social media, and reach out to us and talk to us and bring up your concerns, your needs, and just ask us your questions. Thomas, who answers a lot of questions every week, has great segments for us. We have a fun segment from you this week, don't we, Tom?
Yeah, so this week is just a quick segment on CO2 in the grow room. It's not very informative. It's meant to be a little bit more fun. I'm actually going to be working into a little bit more of the fun segments each week, and then trying to lead into a much larger informational segment at the end of the month. But I'm ready to go with that one when you are, and then I got to split because I got to get ready for the next show.
Yes, because you're on tonight. Talk about that real quick.
Oh, yeah. So Still Talking with the Dead, Jeff and Ben, great guys, good comic book artists. I've been a supporter of them since their second issue of Vermont Grow Coaching has either had product placement or an ad in each comic book since issue number 2. So I'm finally getting a chance to sit down with them and have a chat with them tonight. So I'm going to scoot off here, grab a quick bite, and then off to see them.
Awesome. They've been on the show before, a bunch of great guys. The Token Dead, or was it it's different now because they have
it's still Talking with the Dead now because The Walking Dead sued them. Yeah, so like, well, in my mind is like, okay, well, America's sue happy, and if you have somebody like AMC suing your ass, you're doing something right with your life, I guess.
Right.
Right, man. Yeah, it's very interesting, right? All right, guys. Well, here it is. We're going to talk to Thomas. Check him out tonight. We'll post a couple links to that. We'll share it. And then here it is, the Vermont Grow Coach and Growers Guide.
Hey guys, this is Coach, and welcome to Growers Guide, your weekly beginner-friendly cannabis tips and tricks. This week, we're talking about CO2. All right, let's go. So first things first, if your room is not dialed in, this is not going to work. So get your room dialed in first, check your vapor pressure deficits, make that happen. All right, let's go. Let's make it simple. CO2 plus adequate lighting equals bigger, better yields. End of story. Okay. Tom said I need to give a disclaimer. CO2 is bad for your health. You should not be pumping CO2 into your bedroom. Bad idea. But if you have a nice sealed room, when I say sealed, I mean seal it off with foam, seal it off with tape. It has to be airtight. That's going to be fantastic to enrich with CO2. So let's do it. Let's go. All right. So now we've got our sealed room. You're going to see at the top, we've got a mini split AC. That mini split is going to do two things. It's going to dehumidify and cool the room. The dehumidifier is absolutely necessary because you're otherwise pumping heat and water into a sealed room, which creates high humidity. You're going to notice over on the right-hand side, you've got a fan and filter combo. That fan is not exhausting to the outside of the room. Instead, it is just circulating inside the room because you don't want to lose your CO2. Now, over to the right-hand side, I already said right-hand side. Look at the left-hand side. Geez, where is Tom when I need him? Look at the left-hand side. All right, you got your CO2 tank and you got that oscillating fan. The oscillating fan is going to keep the air moving nice and well around the room for you. And that CO2 tank is going to pump in 900 to 1200 ppm of CO2 throughout the entire grow. This is going to be fantastic for your plants, but you are going to want to make sure to set this up on a proper controller or a proper regulator system so that while you are in working with your garden, you can lower the CO2 to adequate levels. So stay out of there until it's less than 400 ppm. Hey guys, Tom here. So Coach did a great job again. I mean, I'm loving what he's doing. He's got great hype, but he likes to leave a lot of info out. So I just want to reiterate that if you're going to be doing any sort of CO2 work, make sure your room is properly sealed, that you have proper monitors, regulators, and alarms to notify you in the event that the CO2 levels are too high in any living area in the home. And please, please, please ensure that those ppm levels are down to safe levels before you enter your grow room. This has been Vermont Grow Coaching with Growers Guide. Have a great week.
All right. Another great segment from Tom and his new buddy, right, Coach, which you love seeing now. Which is gonna be fun because we're going to change the segments may change up a little bit, so we're looking forward to everything that Tom's got for us. A couple questions come to mind, obviously, right? Because obviously CO2, right? We're talking about CO2. There's multiple ways you can give your plant CO2 from tanks, from burners, right? There's propane burners available on the market. There's bags you can hang. There's different things. But you talked about an elevated CO2 level that can be unsafe for people.
Yeah, so when it comes down to it, I didn't want to go into great detail about any particular method of how you can actually install this in your grow room, specifically because I want people to search out the proper information themselves and make informed decisions. Because when it comes down to it, there's too many, for lack of a better word, stoners out there that are sitting down watching YouTube next week, and they're going to see, oh, CO2. Oh, I'm going to go out and get a tank. I think I got a paintball gun. I wonder if I can hook that up and somehow pump that. I think I'm going to do it. And you end up blowing something up or killing somebody from toxic levels of CO2. So with that respect, yes, there are numerous ways to do it. There's propane, so that you can use propane burners. One of the biggest issues with that is a lot of people don't think about where they're putting their propane tank. Well, if you're not supposed to be storing your propane tank from your grill inside your kitchen, you probably shouldn't be storing a propane tank that could also work for your grill inside the room next to your bedroom. So little things like that. But I think it leaves it open for people to reach out, and if they are really interested in pursuing CO2 enrichment and things of that nature, we can definitely discuss that with them and help teach them that in a much better setting than a quick 2 or 3 minute video. With that said, a quick tip on CO2. The reason I specifically mentioned levels of 900 to 1200 is that it has been proven that CO2 levels up to 1500 ppm can provide some of the biggest and best yields. However, I find that going with the 900 to 1200 range, preferably throughout the entire growth cycle, actually uses considerably less CO2 than trying to maintain 1500 ppm. Because once you get over about 1000 ppm, the system has to work considerably harder to maintain a higher ppm at that point. And then as far as being in your grow room afterwards, anything under 400, I'm safe. I feel safe going in there. But if you don't have a monitor that says at least 400 ppm or less, I stay out of there until it does. You can have an exhaust system or setup or something specifically to exhaust the CO2 before you go into the room. But if you spend too much time in a room that's enriched with CO2, you're going to start to get a headache. Your body's going to start to shut down, and you could actually kill yourself.
Oof. We don't want anybody trying that. But CO2, now what does it do for you mentioned yield, right? Like,
yeah,
why do you use CO2?
So CO2 pretty much, in layman's terms, it opens the stomatas on the plant to allow more energy absorption through photosynthesis. So if you're growing with a small CFL system or a 100 watt light, CO2 is not going to do much for you because you don't have that much lighting to begin with. But if you're growing with several thousand watts of light, or you have a big 600 watt LED system over one plant, CO2 enrichment at that point is going to open up the stomatas, or the pores, for lack of a better term, in the plant, which will then allow photosynthesis to happen and allow the plants to grow faster, bigger, and yield better.
Beautiful, right? And it's more what they can actually get outside, right? We try to replicate the outdoor conditions as much as we can, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, indoor conditions on average are considerably lower in CO2 levels than their outdoor counterparts. However, I've even seen a considerable increase in people who are using light deprivation greenhouses and incorporating CO2 into those greenhouses, and seeing easily increases 20 to 25% yield. So it's amazing what you can see.
Right. No, and we hear stories about a lot. I've known people who operated the burners. So yeah, guys, just safeguard yourselves. Go educate yourselves. I mean, a lot of these things have benefits. They're great education. There'll be more on that, right, Tom?
Absolutely. And there are several companies now that actually have outdoor CO2 units. So it looks just like a propane tank that you have outside your house, except it's CO2. So they just come by once a month and they top off your CO2 tank, which sits outside, so you don't even have to run into any of the issues of having a combustible explosive container inside your home at all. So tons of different options out there, and I'm definitely going to dive more into CO2 as well as lots of other ways to help increase your yield over the next several weeks as we approach the start of the growing season for outdoor. And then we're going to dive really hard into preparing greenhouses. I've actually got a whole new greenhouse to set up just for you guys.
Awesome. We were really excited for that. Because people are starting to think about that, getting their seeds ordered, getting all their stuff lined up, because we're in the middle of winter now. So hopefully the next few months here, we're going to have to be prepared for that. So
that reminds me, seeds. End of February, I will have 4 new strains available. GMB 77 will now be an F8, and that will be available. And then I will also have 3 other F1 crosses, which are a cross between my GMB 77 as well as a couple of other of my favorites out there. So get excited for that, because there will definitely be a post towards the end of the month that'll offer out some free seeds and everything too. So I am very excited to see some people grow those out this year.
And they're great genetics. I've seen them. I've been able to taste them, see them, cryo them. They're great strains. I can't wait for that. Anyways, we're at the end, guys. Another great show today. Beth, again, thank you for coming on, sharing your experiences and the stigmas and all the things you've had to face. It's an amazing story. I think a lot of people tend to shy away from those issues, right? Because it's just easy, right? Like no drama, no issues, no nothing like that. But to change over from industries that, like you were saying before, are hard and the stigma is there, right? Just like Sherry in the nursing industry, just like Timothy in the law firms, right? Like, there's a stigma there, right? Thomas, we're growers. We're the guys that are calling you guys all the time. So our industry is different, right? We've been here a long time, but it's very unique to have people come on and share that story with us, because it is hard to make that transition. And as for a woman and for somebody who stands for social equities across the board, right? It's amazing to have you guys come on and share the story. So again, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Please, one more time, let everybody know how they can reach out to you and become a part of what you do. And the one thing we didn't talk about was the supper club, right? Which is another cool thing that you're doing. So you seem to have your hands in every which angle of the industry. But if somebody wants to reach out in the industry, how can they reach out to you?
So the most direct and easiest way is bethwaterfall.com. You can get in touch with me on email or join my mailing list there. And then, of course, elevatene.org is Elevate's site. And then I hope to see y'all at a NECAN event in September, scheduled for September. So I hope to see y'all there.
Oh my God, fingers crossed. Hopefully it'll work out. I mean, we're seeing positive results from, games and certain things and here and there, but then all of a sudden we have a step back, so then it becomes cautionary again. So hopefully people can get more cannabis in their regimen, right? Hopefully more people can have an AFA day and tune in to Sherry every morning at 8. But I want to thank everybody again for coming on. Another great show. Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's been another great, wonderful world of Zoom and internet as we know it. I think this is our new.
We had fun without you.
Yeah, right.
It was the best part.
It's just I watch it, and like lately, because we've had so many issues, and like today was like literally I was having a great day. My internet was fine, and all of a sudden 12 o'clock it went away. I call, they're having issues. I get it back. I'm like, it comes back full. It's been great for a couple hours. And right before the show, it crashed. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But it seems to happen every week. It's always something, right? Especially with the way Facebook treats us. And I want to apologize for people. We had a rash of people messaging about not being able to watch the show today because they were being told it was restricted or various different things that I'm going to look into after the show here. And a lot of people were able to get on and comment and be a part of the show. So if you guys missed the show, we'll have the archive up on our YouTube page and we can just share it back out when hopefully myself and Thomas and the people on the show can get all of our restrictions back or our capabilities and our free social media, right? Back in Facebook stuff. Their hatred of us.
I'm just gonna have to listen to Facebook and start being a good little boy and not post any photos of pretty plants.
Well, it's just interesting to see the rhythms of it because we all see other people doing things that are doing more than we are, and there's no issues, right? Obviously, we are part of the show, so that probably has a whatever against us right there. And even if you watch the numbers on our show, one day we have hundreds of interactions, and other days we have 20. And you're like, this isn't just, it is impossible. So when people talk about shadow banning and restricting and not allowing you to get through and seeing the stuff that you want to get to, I know if I go and search Vermont Cannabis Solutions right now on Facebook, I don't think it pops up unless it comes through our show, right? So it's a fucked up situation. Hopefully social media will, again, help us end the stigma and just open it up. You know what I mean? I see things on mushrooms. I see things on all sorts of stuff. And, you know, and if you, one thing I want to tell everybody in 2021, if it's something you don't agree with, just scroll by, right? Like there's no need for,
Hallelujah.
there's no need for negative energy. If it's something you don't agree with, pass by. If it's something you don't understand, like Thomas said, go do research, ask.
Google it.
Ask.
Right? We live in a day and age where the information is literally at your fingertips. And then when you Google it, read 5 articles. That's the only thing I ask people to do is read the 5 articles, because you're going to find different outlooks on different things, and then come up with your own idea for it, and then come talk to somebody, right? But create an idea and be open-minded, right? Too many people are not open-minded enough. A lot of people work hard in their industries, and a lot of people, you know, we just need some more support. And then come out of the closet, you know what I mean? It's a great day and age to do that. You know, again, looking at the numbers of shows and things I see going on, and the support and reactions and stuff like that, there's still a lot of people that are in the closet that don't want to hit that like button or that subscribe button or that support button that allows us to keep doing what we do, allow Sherry to do what she does, allow Timothy to do what he does, and Thomas, and of course Beth, right? Because we need people to go to our websites, we need people to go to our pages, we need those likes, we need those interactions, and we need your support. We need for every show, not even ours and beyond. And that being said, if you're not doing anything tonight, I know Sherry has a great show as well tonight, if you want to get in on that. And I know Thomas has his great show as well tonight. And again, look at Beth Waterfall.com for any upcoming events. And hopefully, guys, we'll have a great 2021, and we'll see you next week. Like I said, we have a lot of great guests coming on next week. Bobby Nuggs. If you guys don't know who Bobby Nuggs is, Google him. He's everywhere. Part of Northeast Leaf. He's doing pizzas.
Bobby's Bar Bar.
We love Robbie, right? So I'm really excited to get him on board and talk to him, because he's been in the industry again for years on the really active, you know, the really pushing activism sides. It's great to see all his work and energy paying off with a bunch of new endeavors that are a lot of fun for them. Strains of the week, writing articles. It's going to be a great time to talk to Bobby. So again, thank you guys. Sherry, sign off. Tell people how they can get and find you guys every morning.
Every morning on the Green Nurse, we also have YouTube and Instagram. So the Green Nurse page, and 8 to 8:20 every morning, Monday through Friday. And then every Wednesday night, we are profiling cannabis nurses in the industry. You know, it's the year of the nurse, 2021, as was last year. And so we're truly trying to decrease stigma and get more health professionals educated. So we're bringing on all cannabis nurses and going to be interviewing them throughout the year. Every Wednesday night.
A lot of great shows. And then we have Thomas, Vermont Grow Coaching, going to be on another great show tonight. And again, Thomas, how can people reach out to you, and how can people tune in tonight?
So tonight you can tune in on Still Talking with the Dead, or I believe they also posted from the Dorkening on Facebook. As far as myself, you can find my page and can find me on Facebook, but I'm not going to be able to respond to any messages or anything for at least 3 days. Although it might be 7, because I got 2 conflicting responses from Facebook. Maybe they hit me with 3 and 7. I don't know. But you can also find me on Instagram, Cannabuzz, LinkedIn, although I've got like 90 notifications on there right now, so I don't know if I check that often enough. You can also find me on website, vermontgrowcoach.com, or contact me directly via phone or text at 802-342-5381.
Awesome. And Timothy, again, Vermont Cannabis Solutions.
Cannabis Solutions, Google Tim Fair, you know, reach out. I'm always here. Pretty easy to find.
All right, guys. Well, until next week, let's have a great week. Let's have an AFA week. Put our best foot forward, and hopefully we have some interesting things to say next week. Happy Inauguration Day. It's going to be
And he's frozen.
He's frozen again. Oh, and here we are. I guess we're going to end the show.
All right. Oh, there he is. He's moving.
Oh, no, there you go. They died. No.
You disappeared again, Joe.
Oh man, I was just saying happy inauguration day to everybody. And let's look forward to the next 4 years. It's going to be an interesting transition. It's going to be interesting to see all the new changes and stuff that happens within the next few months. And hopefully they don't forget about cannabis. That's the only thing I ask for. Let's knock on wood. Let's get some safe banking acts passed. Let's get some reforms going. Let's try to get things on the straight and narrow again. And let's line it all back up so we can get research, regulations, and open markets established, right? Guys, I love you. Again, thank you for spending the time with us, Beth, today. It was
Thanks, Joseph.
another amazing day. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Again, find our archives on YouTube.
Cheers.
Masters of Cannabis. Oh, there it is.
Cheers.
See you next week.
Adios.
Hey guys, good to see you, Beth.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye. Thanks again.